All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Berube. I'm the chair of the Millis Finance Committee. Tonight is 12 October. I will call the meeting to order and ask that the committee members introduce themselves, starting at my left.
Patrick Gatto.
John Stedman. Peter Underhill.
John Lohr.
Jody Garson.
Kathy McGinnis.
Sarah Reyes.
Joyce Boyardi.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So we have full attendance tonight. We have a lot of work to do. I'm just going to ask the audience to make sure that when you'd like to speak, please get my attention one way or another. You can throw erasers, you can jump up and down. Just please get my attention. I have every intention to get everybody's attention. Ms. Boyardi.
Thank you, sir. There was a question for the audience. Does the school committee have to join the Zoom in order for the presentation to be presented?
Well, if they have quorum, then they need to go through their procedures. I don't need to do anything.
No,
Okay.
that wasn't the question.
Sorry, I just don't know if Deirdre is going to be presenting just the physical slides, or if you want me to join the Zoom meeting so that I'll present the slides.
You can do whatever you wish. The slides will be available online. If it facilitates your presentation and you can do it quickly, without too much delay, then I'd encourage you to do it, just to make sure that there's as much access to the information as possible. So, okay.
Thank you, sir.
So what I was going to say was that I'd ask that you get my attention, and then once you speak, please speak directly into the mic. I don't speak like this because I have a God complex and I want everybody to hear me that loudly, but that's how the audience can hear, and that's how it comes best across the television and the recorded video. So I ask that you do the same. Thank you very much. We're going to take one item out of order, and I ask that Ms. Lisa Harden come forward.
Thank you for taking me out of order. Lisa
welcome.
Harden, 56 Walnut. I just wanted to give everyone an update that there's been new information. The owner of Rock Lawn, Tom Roach, has requested that we dismiss or withdraw or whatever the citizens petition. At this time, he wants to pursue his private buyer. And if
Great.
that doesn't pan out, then we could I could do this again in the spring.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to do. Okay?
Okay.
So it's still on I can't take it off the warrant because it's a citizens petition. But at town meeting, I will be making a recommendation to dismiss it or withdraw it or whatever. I'll find out what the proper procedure is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Then he might have a buyer.
Okay. Mr. Barry, are you prepared to speak, or? All right, so Mr. Barry is, I'll give him some time to catch his breath. He is the chair of the, wherever you choose, sir. He is the chairperson of the Capital Planning Committee. I think he's been the chair, volunteer chair, for probably 6, maybe even 7 years. He is, there are quite a few members, there's like 7 or 9 members on the committee. Most of where there's reps from the Finance Committee, which I represent the Finance Committee. On the Capital Planning Committee, there is a Select Board rep, there's a School Committee rep, there are at-large reps. Mr. Barry has been on it as the chairperson, I believe, since it started. He does most of the work. We all try to make his life a little easy, but he is still doing all of the work, and so the town, I think, is indebted to you for your service. You do a great job. Regardless of the results, there's lots of challenges, and nobody says that we're coming up with all of the solutions. The Capital Planning Committee, really, our job is to prioritize the capital needs each budget cycle for consideration by this committee, by the Select Board, and ultimately to the citizens or voters at the town meetings. So twice a year, the Capital Planning Committee puts out a report, and that's what Mr. Barry is here to present. So that's kind of a long-winded introduction to help you get started, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Berube, and thank you, committee, for having me here tonight, and thank you for the kind words. It's been 5 years, 5.5, feels like 7 or 8 or 9, whatever you said, but we've been working hard to try to help prioritize things as best we can. So I think you're probably all generally familiar with the drill here. So over the past several months, we've worked with town administrator in the various departments in town for the various capital items that they're requesting that are going to go on the warrant for November. We had a slightly lighter load this time than we've had some of the other ones. That's, even though it was a less number, I'd say we probably had more debates on some of these things than we've had in the past, because a couple of them, as you know, are very large items in terms of dollars. So there were, so I've shared with you a draft report, and I emphasize the word draft. Our committee is actually meeting tomorrow, hopefully to finalize this. So there could be some changes to this. I think largely it should stay the same, but we do still have to finish debates on a couple of items. So what you see here could change a little bit. So there were 6 items that we looked at, which are listed on the second page here. A Chevy Silverado dump truck for the DPW, an air compressor for the DPW, the feasibility study for the middle high school, some new air conditioning equipment for this building, for the Veterans Memorial Building, and then an engineering study for potentially another PFAS treatment system for one of the wells. Actually, I think it would cover more than one of the wells potentially. And also a keyless entry system for this building. So we have a process we've established over the years where we've got a set of criteria by which we rank the various items, taking into account things like public safety, or is it part of a, legislative, it has to be done for legislative purposes, or mandated purposes, I should say. The benefit to our overall citizens, all those sorts of things. So where we ended up in that process, actually, before I get to the ranks, we decided as a committee to do the senior center as a separate item in our deliberations. We did deliberate it, and we did go through our ranking system, just like we would any other project. So we treated it the same, but we decided to not put it in the same batch as the other items, just because of the nature of it being such a large item going to the voters for consideration, at the upcoming meeting. We opine on it in our memo, but we're not sort of ranking it against the keyless entry system, for example. We just thought that's a very unfair comparison, a smaller type item like that against, a very significant item like the senior center. So putting the senior center aside for a minute, and I'll come back to that. For the items we did look at, we did conclude that per our ranking system, and I should say tentatively conclude, because this is still subject to debate at our meeting tomorrow, that 5 of the items were the highest priorities. Those are the pickup truck for the DPW, the compressor for the DPW, the feasibility study for the middle high school, the air conditioning equipment for this building, and then the engineering study for the potential PFAS treatment. Those met all of our criteria as being high priority items for the town. The keyless entry system is a little bit lower, so that was a medium priority per our system, per our assessment. And maybe I'll just pause there just before we get to the senior center. Any questions on those particular items or things that came up as we went through the discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Stedman?
At the spring meeting, we approved a Chevy Silverado for DPW. What is the difference and why is this one showing up?
Yeah, this is an additional truck that the DPW currently has. And this actually has been on their list for a while. So back when we started the committee 5 years ago, feels like 10. The department, many of the departments did give us a full list of their capital items as best as they could inventory them. So both of these trucks, they have several trucks, the pickup trucks, the DPW. This one was on the list originally, and it has come up more or less on schedule. It might have been slightly sooner than we thought, but this is an additional truck. So these are, we've kind of known about this one, that it was going to come up.
So it's a truck that makes it different from the $56,000 that was approved at spring meeting, I guess?
Well, it's another truck needed for them to do the work they have to do in maintaining roads and plowing and those sorts of things.
Okay. Any more
All right.
questions? Does anybody need or desire a quick explanation on the compressor, for instance? That's a mobile compressor. I think the name on the compressor that they have right now is, it's a Sullivan compressor, which is, I think it was like 26 years old. Mobile compressor. I've never seen a Sullivan compressor. Most of them are, Ingersolls and Cats and,
Yeah,
you name it.
Not sure that
So.
businesses around anymore, but.
Right. These are the things when they're out there and they have to cut pavement or, jackhammer anything, or, that's what they take with them to, and I'm sure they use it for other things as well. The feasibility study, we'll hear more about that a little bit later from the school committee who's on the agenda tonight. Air conditioning equipment for this building, if there are questions for that, Mr. Gazinski can speak to that. And then DPW, the PFAS engineering study, Mr. McKay, I think spoke to us about that, and we can answer any questions on that if there's any. None heard?
Chair.
Oh, Mr. Gatto.
Just back on the Silverado, do you know if it's replacing an existing truck, or is it going to be
Yes.
an addition to the fleet?
It's a replacement of an existing truck, yep.
So there's a schedule of all their vehicles with, replacement years, projected replacement years. In this case, it's on there. Maybe a slight deviation, to the left on this one. Nothing that we thought was out of line or a drastic surprise. All those replacements are probably theoretical in the sense where they track mileage and hours and condition, rust,
Right.
so.
Yep. Yeah, and it's similar in some ways with the police department, they do have a cycle of cars that turn over really, almost every year. The DPW has a cycle of various pieces of equipment that are going to turn over year over year that will need to be replaced.
Does, Mr. Barry, I don't remember exactly, but I assume that this particular vehicle, almost $62,000, includes ancillary equipment like plows
This one
and
has a plow on it.
maybe a sander?
I don't remember if it had a sander or not. I think it did.
I don't remember off the top of my
I know
head.
it had a plow.
Okay.
Definitely had a plow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to cover that at town meeting. Okay?
Okay.
Keep going, please, thanks.
Maybe to move to the senior center. So we did have the Council on Aging come talk to us a couple of weeks ago and give us a very good overview of the various options they've considered and the process they've gone through. I'm sure they've had a similar discussion with you. So it was a very well done presentation by the council. Again, we did go through the same process we do for other types of capital. And we did conclude that it was a high priority for the town. Obviously, it's an expensive item, and it's going to go in front of the voters for them to consider in the next few weeks here. So we've commented, and again, this language might change a little bit pending our discussion tomorrow, but I think the spirit of it is going to stay intact here, that we as a committee felt that this is an important project for the town. And that the current facilities are inadequate for what the town needs, both today and in the future. Whether or not the town can afford that is another item, and that's not necessarily for our committee to opine on. So that's for the voters to opine on.
Okay, any
I'll
Any
take
questions on that?
One other thing I want to just mention.
Go ahead.
Before we finish. Not for the senior center. I'm happy to take questions on the senior center if there are any. Okay.
quiet group tonight?
All right. Last thing I'll point you to is this schedule in the back. Again, this could change slightly, although it probably won't change much. But this, hopefully this looks familiar because we've done this for the last few years. It's an overall summary of all the capital that we know about, that we've collected from all the various departments. Maybe somewhat discouragingly, but not just surprisingly, every time we update it, the number goes up. So as of now, we've got about almost $92 million of future capital needs, if you look at sort of the bottom right corner of the total there. We've got it spread out over the years by which We think it would be requested by the various departments. Now, it's kind of a moving target because sometimes things come sooner, sometimes come later. You'll notice the biggest number of all at the bottom is what we call sum of indefinite. Thank you, Excel pivot tables. That's how it labels that. 51 million, more than half of it is in the category of, we know the town, well, we think the town probably needs it, or certainly there's a department that would like to have something on this list. We're commenting, we don't know when that would be, when it could be, paid for, basically. So these are gonna be bigger ticket items. So things like the middle high school renovations, the senior center, athletic fields, items like that, the renovations to the Lansing Millis building, for example. These are items that have come up as desired capital upgrades of various types. We just don't know when they could be paid for. So they're in sort of this indefinite column. We don't want to presuppose any year where those things might happen. They could happen this year, they could happen 10 years from now. Hard to say.
Mr. Barry, if you look under Public Works, there's an infrastructure line. Are those
Yeah.
projected investments in MS4 storm sewer, or what is?
Oh, there's actually quite a bit in there. So several things in there, and there could be an adjustment to this schedule in the future. Road improvements are in there.
Okay.
And that could potentially become a budget-related item at some point. But we do have a certain amount of road improvements. There are some stormwater-type improvements in there year by year. I believe we have $1 million. It just as a placeholder year by year for various types of stormwater improvements, culverts and that sort of thing. The bigger item towards the end is the 6.5 million. That would be potentially another PFAS treatment plant. Plus there might be a little bit of other things in that bucket too. There's a lot on the DPW side that could be coming down the line over the next several years.
I would, I'll talk about this probably tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting, but don't need to really go too far into it now, but perhaps that infrastructure line can be broken out between roads and enterprise.
Yeah, this is something we have talked about, is trying to get a little more granular as to things paid by enterprise funds versus other types of funds. That's a future enhancement to the report, perhaps.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon?
Yeah, in a similar vein, under schools, there's a line for school. What goes into that line?
School's the line for school.
60,000 line.
Good question, 60,000. What is that one? Trying to remember. I think that's computer. No, well, computers would be under equipment. That's just that's going to be some sort of equipment. I think it probably just got mislabeled. I don't know offhand what that is.
It's not computer.
It's probably computers, would be my guess, and it
It
just
could-
got kind of mistagged. There's
It
probably
could be a
belongs on the
holdover
equipment
for
line.
curriculum as well, but we should look at that.
It could be that, too. Yeah, I can check what it is. I think it's just, it really is either equipment or a vehicle. I think it just got ticked with the wrong label there.
No worries, that happens.
Yeah.
Off with your head.
And I just wanted to thank you for all the work that the committee has put into this. I mean,
It's incredible.
over, what'd you say, 6 years?
6 years, yes.
6 years to have come this far, it's really impressive.
5
and
years, sorry, 5 years.
It's very, very much appreciated.
May 2017 is when the committee was founded. We probably didn't really start meeting until later that year, so it's probably coming right up around 5 now.
Well, you've done an incredible job.
Well, thank you. And the committee does a lot. So Peter does a lot as well, so it's not all me.
Yes, it is.
Ms. Harden?
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Harden, Town Clerk. I just have a quick question. What's this 40,000 for the Town Clerk?
I believe that item relates to voting machines, if I remember correctly. That's my recollection of what was in there. So we had an item on there for voting machines, voting machine upgrades of some sort.
I'm not aware of it.
Okay?
The good news is that this 10-year forecast is really just a kind of a forecast sheet and not an actual, those items that are, say, for next year's budget year, 2024, the departments will validate those costs and those requirements in their Form 7s and their budget submissions during whichever budget cycle they choose, whether it be spring or fall. And there will be, so these numbers will be validated. I would say that the margin for error is great on this. It's $91 million worth of requirements. If we blew it by 40,000, we're doing a pretty good job.
It's a very fungible list.
Yep, and we're not always the best at taking things off immediately after something gets funded by town meeting or
Yeah, and
approved.
actually, just to that
grants.
point, grants are a tricky one for us. A lot of times, we don't know that something got paid for. So we know when it gets paid for at a town meeting, or, approved at town meeting. We don't know when somebody got a grant for something. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So yeah, sometimes things stick on this list a bit longer than they need to.
Okay, so it's actually 91,860 million.
Yeah, but I'm sure we'll find 40,000 somewhere else to tack it right back on.
I hope not.
All
Okay.
right. All right, well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Okay, so we did our presentation on petition to articles last week, and we heard from Ms. Harden a little bit earlier. There are 3 additional petitioned articles on the warrant, and the lead petitioner, Mr. Germain, is here to speak to us about those. So, Mr. Germain, thank you.
Excuse me while I collect myself. I'm a little out of sorts at this stage, trying to readjust to some time limits. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this evening. And I wanted to go over very briefly the concept behind the 3 petitioned articles. The original intent of these articles, and primarily remains that way, is that the options that were presented, which ranged from approximately $16 million to $21 million for the senior center, a lot of people came to me and suggested that was much too high for them in terms of what they would recommend. So we tried to come up with a series of options, and these are designed to present an opportunity for people to consider other alternatives and to consider what the implications are to the seniors themselves. It's not an entirely new facility that we're necessarily going after, and it's trying to make use of existing facilities. What we were concerned with is that no other options other than new facilities basically were being presented at the time, and that they were quite expensive. So we wanted to try to put something in perspective to give people an understanding of why the concern was raised with respect to the costs and what was being done to address some of the senior concerns. Obviously, we've addressed a couple of those this evening in the capital planning, because we know that there are a number of items coming down the road. And the context that we were concerned with is a context of the amount of debt schedule that we're going to be incurring over a long period of time, not necessarily a long period, but a short period of time. So in that context, let me go through a few things as to why we came up with the list of objects in the petitions that we've come up with. First, we have a new school initiative and PFAS, which obviously are pretty large issues. Well, we're looking at that and saying, okay, the issues that we are concerned with have to do with some costs. The first one is there's a concern about renovating Lansing Millis, the old train station. That one was, we know, we've already seen a $2 to $3 million projection coming out as to what that would cost to deal with. So I'm just going to go through some broad numbers here to give some ideas. There was a proposal to renovate the VMB. That's about a $3 million cost that's been proposed, although that may escalate. The existing senior centers, as proposed, the 3 of them are in the range of $16 to $21 million. It's unclear how much of is going to be taken into account for additional inflation and other projection costs. The schools, which are essential to our town in the long term, and we understand that, but there's a significant cost there also. We have to upgrade middle school, high school. The costs that we have seen range anywhere from $30 to $70 million, That does not necessarily include major reconstruction of the schools. So we don't know to what level that will be. Obviously, the school committee and others will come forward on the details of that in the future. The PFAS, we've already approved one PFAS plant to go in, $6.5 million. Approximately $3 million of that was to be paid for with, I believe, CARES funding. But these are $6 million projects. We knew from the very beginning, based on the levels of PFAS being found at the various wells, that at least one other well was likely to be required to have PFAS construction put in, another $6 million, and I see that that is in fact one of the items that we're going to be dealing with, and there could be in the future yet another one that we have to deal with. Some of the things that we don't see necessarily as obvious to everyone are the costs for the renovation that are going to hit the town with respect to the Tri-County. They're going to be renovating that facility. We are going to have to absorb those costs. We have no option in that area. And there'll be the continuing repairs to existing facilities, upgrading of existing facilities, or replacement of things like ambulances, fire engines, DPW. You could keep on naming them. We did some analysis of what the estimated costs would be to the taxpayers of the town. First of all, the initial analysis says if we take the schools and all the items I just put together, we can be looking at anywhere from 80 to 100 to 120 million dollars worth of new taxes for the town if you add all these together. Now, the implications of that were fairly profound. If you look at it on an average home value of $462,618, and I appreciate the fact that the town was willing to share these numbers with me, because as you well know, for any of you who know I've sat on this committee, this is not my forte. Over a period of 30 years with equal principal at 5.75% estimated interest rates, a $16 million project would come out as approximately $303 a year. The first year would be $437.75 with a declining balance, and down to the last year where it would be $105. Then we did an analysis that said, okay, nice numbers, what's that really mean? Well, what boils down to is the cost to a homeowner, if you look at it as $10 million increments at a $463,000 home, you're looking at $292 a year on average. Now, I'm not taking the top, I'm not taking the bottom, we're just averaging it. You can take that and multiply it out. The 292 can multiply out. You can also look at, that's a $10 million for the first year at the highest level. At the average level, it's $190 a year. That says at an $80 million investment from the town in debt, it's going to represent $2,336 the first year for the homeowners. $100 million is $2,920, and $120 million is up to $2,280. Now, if you take the full amount that first year, it's $3,504 for $120 million, $2,920. I may have read the wrong number there for the first year, and $2,336. These are significant numbers for homeowners to consider, and so we looked at that and said there have got to be some other options. We hope. Doesn't mean that we can't go forward. Obviously, this has a bigger impact when you have a more expensive home, because an $80 million cost for a $650,000 home is on the order of $2,136 the first year on the average price. The actual first year is closer to $3,280. And I could go on with those numbers. The bottom line is there's a significant cost to the homeowners when you add to the debt at the levels of 80, 100, and $120 million. Given that, we were trying to make up ideas that would come up with a better way to utilize at least the existing facilities for the seniors, or a better way to keep the costs down. And to that end is where the 3 petitions came up. Basically, we want to make better use of the town facilities, we want to offer affordable alternatives, and to place in context what was going on. So if we renovate the existing center, what we're doing is providing a facility that's centrally located for the seniors. We're using the existing facility, and we're making it habitable. Right now, if you walk down there, it's not exactly the most presentable place in the world. It doesn't take much to realize that there are ways to redesign without breaking out walls and everything else to give the area a more presentable, comfortable feeling. And it's to that end that we said, okay, let's take an estimate on what we think that might cost, add to it, and make sure that we can do it in those levels. And you saw on the projections for the petition, I think we had something like $3.5 million in there, which is, we suspect, more than is necessary to do just that. However, we have associated with that the fact that the town is, we know, going to have to do renovation in this building. If you put in context the renovation, which is already estimated at $3 million plus, and what we're putting in, and you combine them and do them all at the same time, it probably makes the best use of the funds, best use of our facilities, and overall a good opportunity for the town to make better use of the facilities at hand. Now that included potentially, and it doesn't have to occur day one, the use of some of the upstairs rooms on floor 1, considering the basement floor 0, for senior activities in addition to what they already have. It's also important to realize we aren't making great utilization of the space on the basement. There's close to 8,000 square feet of space down there right now. You wouldn't know it in the way you walk in and look at it, but it's a significant amount of space. It's just not well utilized and well constructed at this stage for the seniors. If you add the additional rooms up here, it gives them yet more space, more meeting areas, and so on, if that's what they want. The second part of that was saying, well, if we did move the opportunity for the seniors to come upstairs, where would the facility, where would the people who already reside there, the departments, go? And one of the options that came up was saying, okay, we could move building department and DPW, who have both offered to say, you know, we would enjoy this, to go over to the Lansing Millis building. Both of those departments spend most of their time out on the road almost every day. That's their job. They have to do that. The facility over at Lansing Millis, they've looked at and said, yeah, reconfigured and made habitable, that would be adequate for their needs. And that frees up a fair amount of space. Then we also move recreation over to where DPW presently exists, and it appears that you might even be able to add some additional space for another conference room, small conference room over there. But again, better utilization of existing facilities, and that's part of what we were looking at when we were coming up with these designs. The renovation of the Lansing Millis building, we already know there have been estimates in the $2 to $3 million range. It's important to understand that the estimates that we're aware of were done for architecturally accurate renovation of the building. That is not what we're talking about. First of all, the building has historical significance to the town of Millis only. It is not by any landmark an historical building as Massachusetts defines historical buildings. So we could renovate it, make it look nice, keep the basic look the same, and still have a very nice facility that's usable by these departments or otherwise in the town. And so it makes for a useful facility. It also keeps it from decaying and degrading to the point where we either have to get rid of it or plow it under or something else. We can't keep it the way it is for years to come. The final piece was the discussion of enclosed pickleball, tennis courts, and so forth. And our feeling was that's probably somewhat ancillary to the senior facility. It's nice, a lot of seniors play it, don't get me wrong. I love it, other than the fact that I get crippled every time I play it, but that's beside the point, yeah, right. But the reality is you could separate it. And we looked at other options for that. Town has other land a facility could be put on. It doesn't have to be a big, heavy brick and mortar facility. We looked at what a lot of schools, colleges, and so on do, which they have inflatable facilities. You've seen the big half domes. There are also metal facilities. They're thin metal, but they work. That's another option. They seem to be in the price range of everything we've been looking at in the $2.5 to $5 million range. But it's yet another option that keeps the cost down, and that's part of what we were looking at. When we added it all up, we came out and said, look, we can do all of these or some of these in the price range to cost the town between, call it $4 to $10 million, depending upon how you want to construct these things. A significant savings over the three options that have been presented thus far, and one open for discussion, which is the primary intent of these petitions. The intent that we wanted was to at least look at alternatives and to give the town an opportunity to consider other options than just the three that were being presented, as I indicated right from the beginning. We don't believe that necessarily these are always going to be the best, but we do think that they're a good starting point. We think that they are cost-effective, and we think that they would meet the needs of the seniors who are presently using the facilities on a regular basis without taxing them. And they are the ones who are on fixed income, so it's something that we have to consider when we consider building these new facilities. So that's the basics of what we have presented in our petitions. So I'll open it to questions.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Underhill, go ahead.
I have a, excuse me, forgive me. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Germain. So if the senior center passes for Article 7,
Yeah.
would you consider dismissing some or all of these? Would you recommend that?
That is yet to be determined, because there's also the possibility that maybe something will come up in advance of Article 7. So that's something to be
Okay,
considered.
good point. Thank you. And just one other question, if I may, Mr. Chair. So Article 7 specifically states that there will be a Proposition 2.5 override
That's
to
correct.
fund. This, we're talking, if we pass all of these at the value, we're talking $9.9 million. Your articles do not reference 2.5 override.
That is correct.
How would you,
It would be
how do you recommend funding this?
funded from regular debt schedule, let the town vote on it, and if they choose to increase the debt to that level, that's their choice.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Germain, Ms. Derwin from, I think, Abacus presented last week on the COA, Council on Aging, Senior Center petition article, or the article, not a petition article. And I asked her, my opinion is that the options are fairly similar in the sense that there's really two options. I mean, there's three that were voted on by the Council on Aging. One is presented, and that's build on Cassidy Farm without a gym. But she provided some historical discussion on, there was consideration of using other facilities, this one included. And I think you participated in those proceedings, a couple years ago. Again, this all started prior to COVID, and things got derailed, as many people's lives did. Could you tell us as to kind of what you remember as to why some of these options, especially the renovation of VMB, why it didn't end up, in the final selection or the final options that were considered by the Council on Aging for the senior center?
I'm not going to speak for the Council on Aging. That's their
But-
decision.
but as
I
the-
did bring up at the meetings I was
Sure.
in,
Thank you.
that I was concerned that there weren't any other options being presented. That didn't seem to be a concern to the other board members at the time, and I'm just one of three at that time. So it didn't get pushed very hard to consider other options. It is a concern as of now. It was a concern to a few of us at the time, but the Council on Aging became the driver for that, and I don't know if you realize that the Select Board does try to keep somewhat hands-off on these to let the various committees, groups, and whatever perform their functions without too much interceding on the part of the Select Board. The reality was that there were other members of the board who felt strongly that the way they were progressing for new facilities was the way to go. I'm just one voice in that, so we moved in that direction, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Does anybody have any more? I have a question that I'll want to defer, because I'm going to direct it to Mr. Kaczynski, but if anybody has any questions while Mr. Jermaine is at the mic, please go ahead, Mr. Lohr.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Could you explain why you broke down the articles into 3 separate articles and kind of the pros and cons of why you went through that process?
Sure. We didn't want to be presenting one article which was an up and down vote to the community. Plus, we felt that they represented 3 different ways of addressing the issues. Any one of those 3 could be possible to move forward without a big impact on the others. Obviously, the first 2 that we're most concerned with, reutilization of VMB resources and renovation of Lansing Millis, we'd like to tie together. But we chose not to tie them directly so that it didn't mean that there was an up and down vote on all 3 of them together. It does say that, you can choose to just do the renovation at VMB, which up to a point, I shouldn't say renovation of VMB, but the senior center within VMB, to make use of the existing facilities, and at a later date, if they found it necessary to expand, they could consider expanding up onto the first floor and moving those departments to these other locations. But again, one didn't have to be contingent upon the other, and that's why we chose to break them up.
Mr. Stedman?
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first one, Ms. Derwin made a very good presentation, saying that they went from the ground up and looked at what the needs were and identified that the new facility should be 15,000 square feet. If you do both the renovation here in VMB and the Lansing Millis building, how close to 15,000 square feet for a senior center do you think you get?
You get pretty close. I can't tell you the exact number, but we've estimated in the 12 to 15,000. Well, I won't say 15, but it's at least in the 12 to 13, maybe even 14,000 square feet.
Thank you. The second question is, which order would you recommend that these be presented in? Of course, we can't set that, but I'd like to hear from you the order you'd like to see them presented.
Certainly. The first one, of course, is I'll call it the renovation of the existing facility here in VMB. The second would be renovation of Lansing Millis. And the third would be, if they choose to go forward, the tennis pickleball courts.
Thank you, Mr. Jermaine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
We have a member from the audience who wants a question first. Yes, please. Just please state your name and your address and fire away. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Meredith St. Sever. I live at 28 Spring Street, and I'm on the board of the COA.
Thank you.
I have a slight correction to make. Ms. Derwin is not with Abacus. She's on our board of the COA.
Okay.
And
My apologies.
No, perfectly fine. And my question for Mr. Germain is, he keeps referring to we. Who's we in his plan and getting his information together and so forth? Is it a committee? Is it, he keeps saying we, so he's not alone. So I'm just wondering who the we is.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Jermaine.
Sure.
Petitioners. It's the
The we would
petitioners.
be the signers of the petitions, and there were others who came forward.
Okay. Mr. Gatto?
This is just a follow-up on the square footage question. You referenced 1,400 square feet. Is that in this building, or is that in the other?
I'm sorry, I just repeat, please.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just following up on the square footage question.
Yeah.
You referenced 1,400 square feet. I'm just trying to get or 14,000 square feet, excuse me. I'm just trying to, is that in this building, or is that in the train building? Can you break that out a little bit so we have an idea of what the?
Yeah, we had estimated 12 to 14 between this building and the Lansing Millis. You add the 2 of them together.
So do you have an estimate then for just the senior center?
Yes.
Let me try to clarify. If DPW and building department move out of this building, that would create, they would move to Lansing Millis building. That would then create 12 to 14,000 square feet in this building. Please affirm that or correct it.
Okay. It would probably create on the order of 8, 10, around 11 or so We figured around 11,000 square feet in this building. There's an additional, we figure 1,800, 12 to 1,800 square feet in the train station. I am not a building expert, so these are all estimates, but.
Okay, unless there's any other
I
questions
just
for
have
Mr.
one
Jermaine?
comment. Can we
Certainly.
just remind people that Lansing Mills is the train station in Millis? The address is 6 Exchange Street. 64 Exchange. Because Lansing Mills could be Rock Lawn also, so.
Okay. A couple more questions, please come on up.
Hi, I'm Christine McCaffrey, 21 Jameson Drive. I'm also coach or vice chair of the Council on Aging. So I just have a couple of questions. And I just want to read something that, but I'll forget what I'm going to say. I said, I don't believe that these petitions articles provide a long-term solution to our need to provide services to nearly 3,000 seniors in Millis. I believe that the senior center proposal presented to the FinCom last week is the right solution. And if the senior center fails at town meeting, then the COA will be looking to work with the Permanent Building Committee, the Select Board, and others to present an alternative solution based upon the hard work of everyone. We won't give up on the center. We are asking the community to come out town meeting on November 10th and vote yes for the senior center. If we go along with his petitions, let me put it this way, and the only one that passes is the renovation of this building, that means that the DPW will stay here and the building department will stay here. And the places that Mr. Germain mentioned in his proposal for the renovation of the VMB requires the use of those spaces. So really what he's asking is that in order to do that renovation or to make the square footage that he wants in here, he really needs to have the Lansing Millis building. What would be the square footage if only the 3,500,000 passed for the VMB? And not using DPW, not using the building. What would where would the square footage be for a senior center here?
Okay.
Okay?
Mr. Jermaine, would you care to answer that?
Sure. We know that the existing square footage is already 8,000 square feet, give or take a few, but that's what the number is that's being used. That's been identified by PBC, it's understood, and that's what the number is that we're using. If we don't do anything upstairs, we've got the full downstairs that is available, and that's the part that we're looking at to have reconfiguration for the seniors who use it on a regular basis. We know that there are 3,000 or so seniors in town. The issue is that the 3,000 seniors, the most important thing right now is to try to get something that deals with the seniors who use the facility on a regular, daily basis virtually, come in for special classes and so forth, and try to keep the costs down tax-wise for the seniors who do use these facilities so that they can continue to afford them. So we're trying to balance a variety of things. None of this is a perfect solution. We're not pretending that. That's the whole point of the discussion for these options. But we are trying to provide alternatives, discussion, and a way in which we can make better use of existing facilities.
Okay. Mr. Underhill.
A question for either Mr. Germain, the petitioners, or the Council on Aging, because I know both groups studied renovating the Veterans Memorial Building. If we do move forward with renovations here, how long will we be without a senior center? Do we know projected timeline for that kind of work?
I will answer for what we were looking at is we are not necessarily projecting reconstruction of facilities which may be required. Now, I back off on one thing. We know this building has to have renovation as a building. There isn't any question about that. That's what the $3 million plus proposal is. That's yet a separate thing. If they get into there and have to deal with plumbing, wiring, and so forth, that's totally, if you will, separate in that it's going to have to be done regardless. That is not a part of what this proposal is. So it's up to the town at that point, no matter how we proceed, if they do renovation in this building to take care of the seniors who are already in the center, if that makes any sense. Beyond that, what we're looking at is some redesign, some making the center a more pleasant environment for the seniors to operate in who do use it on a regular daily basis.
Okay. Ms. McCaffrey?
Thank you for answering my question about the square footage. Our purpose for wanting a new facility or renovating the VMB, we did have three options when we did our forums. We had the VMB, we had Cassidy, and we had Cassidy with the gym. So we gave that to the public. And we were going to, with all of those facilities, we were going to increase the square footage to 15,000 square feet to take care of the growing population of seniors, not just the 3,000 that we have today, to take care of the socialization, to have a better facility for the director and the outreach coordinator. We would still have the same spaces by going through the petition. We're not talking about knocking down buildings. We don't have enough space here to provide the programming that we need to have. We can run one program in one space, and then that has to be taken down and built back up for another program to come in. It's just not enough for the seniors. We just cannot have programming that we'd like to have. So that's why we were going for 15,000 square feet. Keeping this building the way it is, to me, is not enhancing any services for the seniors of Millis.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Klockow.
I have a couple of comments. Wayne Klockow, Chairman of the Permanent Building Committee. This is the first opportunity that I've had to actually hear what these three petition articles are all about. I had received copies of them when they were filed with the town clerk, and therein lies the problem. As the chairman of the Permanent Building Committee, it would be up to us to operationalize and actually make these three proposals work. They're really starting at the back end. They're saying we'll give you $4 million or $3 million or $2.9 million. Build something. Do what you can. It makes no recognition whatsoever as to what actually needs to happen in the space. The discussion about the 8,000 square feet that currently exists in the basement of this building, or the other space that might be freed up, is not necessarily suitable and is not equatable into a 15,000 square foot redesigned facility. The spaces that they're talking about are the spaces where the civil defense is currently occupied in the building. If those were to move out, all you're doing is providing a classroom, of which you are in right now, for the seniors to use. Does it, is it amenable to being recreation space? Would you have exercise machines in here? Would you do any of the physical activities that are planned in these three function rooms, whether or not they exist in the $15.5 million option here or the $16 million option at Cassidy Farm? No, there's There's no thought that's been put into any of that to actually make the space usable the way the Council on Aging and its professional architect have developed over a 3-year period of time to actually make this a space that is usable for seniors. It is putting cost at the beginning of the equation instead of at the end. I would also tell you that by considering these 3 options, whether or not you consider the 3 in total or separately, you put the senior project at the end of the process. If the VMB is to be the home for the seniors, then Lansing Millis building would have to be renovated before that could happen. Otherwise, this space is not available. So that would be a process of at least 9 months to a year of an architectural analysis, putting it out for bids. We wouldn't even be going out for bids for at least another year before that work would be done. Figure at least another year for construction for that to be done before you could even consider what you would do in this building. There is at least $3 million of renovation that needs to be done to this building, irrespective of what the seniors would do. These proposals say nothing about doing an excavation behind this building to make it, to open up more green space and more outside space. There's none of that that I've heard either in these written proposals or in the explanation. So the programming, how you're going to use the space, is ignored. There's no provision for a commercial kitchen where they could prepare food and have facilities for handling the Meals on Wheels. It's just space. The 3 function rooms, as I understand it, would be 3 rooms somewhere in this building to be used in some fashion. No coordination, not necessarily connected. So I have a hard time understanding how any of this meets the needs of what the seniors started in the beginning, which is needing a senior center. The $3 million that has to be done for this building has to do with site improvements, drainage. Those things will exist regardless of whether or not the senior center is here. In fact, it's one of the reasons why the town may would more likely consider Cassidy as an option, not this facility. And I guess the other point that I would ask is that when we did the analysis of the Lansing Millis, the train station, it was contemplated that it would be used as commercial space. It had been commercial space. The last time it was used, it was a Montessori school. The intention that would be that it would be rented out. I've heard nothing about whether the town, the administration, the Board of Select people has any interest in moving departments out of a central location. I don't know what value that has. I'd ask the town administrator to give us an opinion as to whether or not that's discussed or under consideration. But that building would require a complete code upgrade because both of those departments require public access. You'd have to do energy, ADA, fire safety. I'm missing one. We had an estimate of over $3 million, and it was an architectural restoration, and certainly could be done for less, but the code upgrades alone would be substantial. Whether or not the town even would want to have those departments over there, whether or not somebody asked the department head, would you go over there? I have no information to suggest, none has been presented that I'm aware of, that is even desirable. These are non-starters in my opinion. I've never, as a taxpayer, as a voter in this town, I would say, what am I voting for $3.5 million? Where is the scope of work? Where is the cost estimate that we provided? Where is the, what am I getting for this investment? And when it says $3.5 million or any other amount, my question would be, how would that be determined? What amount would that be? And would it necessarily be less than what the $16 million is that we're already talking about? These are ideas that are being expressed as options, but they have not been brought up to the due diligence that the Council on Aging and the Permanent Building Committee have been tasked to do. These have been done in isolation, and we have no knowledge of what the thought process is that the petitioners and others that Mr. Germain references, how they came to these conclusions.
Thank you.
I suggest that you reject these.
Thank you. Mr. Klockow, did the PBC participate in the Council on Aging effort over the last 3 years to develop options for the senior center?
Absolutely. We started with the selection of the architect. That's where the project.
So if that process included renovation of VMB and maybe perhaps renovation of Lansing Millis, then PBC was in fact aware that those were options, but that they were dismissed and not chosen. I mean, to say that the PBC was unaware that those could be options would be probably more accurate to say that you were aware, but you disagreed with them at the time.
Let me see if I can clear that up.
Thanks.
We were aware of the potential for the proposal that we gave you for $15.5 million, which was here at VMB, which is a partial renovation and some new construction here at this facility. We had considered Rossi's as an option. We had considered the train station as an option for the senior center. Both were extremely inadequate for the purpose solely as a senior center. And that's the context that we considered them. We did not entertain any option for moving people around in order to create space, in order, like is being suggested here, to move the DPW and the building department.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Boyardi?
I respect everything that you're having to say, and Mr. Germain, I respect everything that you've presented. It seems to me that the petitions are intended to accommodate the needs of the seniors and keeping costs down. And correct me if I'm wrong. I respect the fact that we want a senior center, but times are such that I don't know, even as a senior, that I want to have that much more taxes on my taxes, knowing that we have other needs for the town. This seems to be a very good compromise, as far as I can see. I don't think it's a Band-Aid. I think it's a compromise so that the seniors can be accommodated. And that's just my opinion from what I'm reading and what's been presented to us. And I just wanted to, let that be known.
But I would just simply say that I think that's the position that every taxpayer in town will have to evaluate.
Right.
But I will tell you at the same time that the Council on Aging rejects these 3 petition articles. They're not suitable, and they formally voted on them and rejected them.
Okay. Mr. Duffy, and then I still have a question for Mr. Gazinski.
Jim Duffy, Exchange Street, Millis. Maybe this is an easy question, but who's responsible for facilities planning in town? Is that the administration department? Is that?
I would say there's multiple entities. Definitely town administration, the Permanent Building Committee, the Capital Planning Committee, department heads. I would say a lot of people have their fingers in that. And Mr. Kaczynski, if you disagree with that, please come up and clarify, but there is not a single entity that is responsible. There is not a town engineer. We have a DPW director who is not responsible for the facilities in the town, at least not all of them, so.
Okay, thank you. We may want to talk about that in the future, come a little more comprehensive of that, because certainly a building sitting there going to waste for all intents and purposes, right? Someone ought to think about what are we going to do. Certainly moving people around may make some sense. Mr. Jermaine, so I heard a number, and this was a question I was going to ask later, but 30 to 70 million is some sort of a projection for the high school?
That's a projection.
I would let the, I would let the school talk about that.
Thank you, but I heard those numbers. But I think something very relevant that you mentioned, and I wanted to come back and make sure I understood this, should I choose to communicate it to the public. Roughly every 10 million of new spend is $292 per year of incremental tax. And I think that's incremental on top of our
Let
already
me just see,
fairly
make sure I
substantial taxes,
quoted
right?
that correctly. Excuse me, that's, I apologize, that's a call it $468,000, $63,000 home. That was the
The
first-
average home,
That was the
understood.
first year. Actually, the average is 190 per year
For every 10
for every
million
$10 million.
after year one. correct?
After year, yeah.
He corrected himself. I made a note. He said 292 per year for 10 million. He corrected himself to 192 per year for 10 million.
Is that a number that you, the finance committee would sort of
We,
say is in line?
that certainly will be validated and discussed during town meeting. I mean, any, you know, there will be costs, debt burdens discussed, and we will come with that information from the finance director.
All right, but that's,
If I can add one comment.
Just hold on for 1 second. Mr. Duffy, floor is yours.
yep, thank you. Sorry, I just, that's very helpful, certainly, I think, to the public to understand what's looming in front of us with respect to senior center, high school, who knows what else the state's gonna hand us, and may we have another. Thank you. My overall comment of senior center, et cetera, I understand the whole process that it went through. It's a big vision. It's great. A lot of passionate people want to deliver the best they can. Unfortunately, my position would be, I think we need to find a compromise somewhere. I think certainly the facilities could need to get enhanced. Whether we can live with slight increment of space, understanding it's kicking a can down the road for some period of time, but I think something might be better than nothing long-term. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir. I do have a question I've been sitting on, and so, Mr. Kaczynski, I'd like to hear your opinion on, and I'm asking you a little bit about using your crystal ball, but if these articles were to pass 24, 25, and 26, what would be the likely, what would ensue after a fall town meeting voter approval? Would there be an appropriation, or is there more or less the authorization for the select board to pursue, or direction to pursue these options if they so choose? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
All I can say to that is that if any of those articles were to be passed, those are,
Can you speak right up into the
I'm
mic? This is
sorry.
important.
those are authorizations, they're not directives. So ultimately, it would be up to the select board to decide whether to act on those, whether to move forward with any part of those articles if they were to pass. So again, the select board could either take no action, wait to a future town meeting to address it. They could take action on one, but not other articles. Again, these are authorizations, not directives. I think that's important to remember.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to wrap up our discussion on these
if I might,
petition
Mr. Chair.
articles, so I'm happy to keep it going.
Yeah,
Ms.
okay.
McGinnis, I'm not
I
wrapping up.
have a question for the, Ms. McCaffrey. What do you say to the seniors that say they can't afford this? I don't know, Mr. Chair. As a finance committee, we don't determine whether people can, do we, like I said, all I am hearing, except from the people that have been talking about it, they can't afford it. They can afford something, but not that. With the school coming, are you pitting school parents versus seniors now? I'm just throwing this out there. This is a lot for all the boards to think about. I hope the selectmen did consider the financial implications of everything, because that's who they answer to.
Okay. Ms. McCaffrey, you're welcome to answer that, but my position on it is we know that there are people that have said, you know, that they can't afford it, and there's others that say that they can't afford it, and really what matters is how they vote when they vote, and that will speak to the issue as to whether they can afford it or not. There are many things that this town has passed previously that we've had the similar discussion. These are all hard choices. Clyde Brown was an issue that many said that the town couldn't afford. We know that our taxes are high. We'll continue to discuss this next week, where this committee will discuss and vote next week to come up with a committee recommendation. I don't know that Ms. McCaffrey's response to that question is needed for us to have that discussion.
No,
So
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Does anybody else have any questions on the issue? Ms. McCaffrey?
We've talked to other towns who have senior centers and who have built a new senior center. Medfield built a new senior center, they've outgrown it. The town's not going to give them any more money to renovate it. This is from the director of the senior center. They've already given them money to build a senior center. Medway's outgrowing theirs. If you do an 8,000 square foot senior center in this building, we can't come back again. We won't be able to come back and say, this is not big enough for us. We really need to have more space. I know taxes are terrible. I have talked to seniors down in the senior center about it. Many of them are not in favor of it only because of the taxes. I understand it. I really do understand it. But they also would like to see something new for them. Not just new, that was phrased wrong, I'm sorry. They want something that can meet the needs of the seniors that we have today. If you keep this the way it is, we will continue to have just 70 people to be able to come to a meal, a special meal, Thanksgiving, St. Patrick's. We have other people who want to come, we have to turn them away. I think that if we're going to do a senior center, this would be the time to do it, and to do it at Cassidy Farm instead of doing it here. Because we can't come back in 5 years and say, I'm sorry, this is not enough space. We need a bigger place. The public would just not do that. So.
Thank you.
Okay. That's going to wrap up our discussion tonight on the petitioned articles. I appreciate everybody's comments and questions. I'm now going to ask Ms. Denise Gibbons and other representatives from the school committee to present the information on the feasibility study. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having us tonight. Deirdre is here virtually. Is she, okay. Citizens petition. I just want to make sure we're working off.
I'll just say that if anybody can't see the school committee's presentation during the meeting, it is accessible on the Finance Committee meeting material link on the town website for tonight's meeting, 12 October. So you can either follow along separately if you can't see it on Zoom, or you can refer to it at a later time.
Perfect. Deirdre, when you have
Does
a chance.
that look okay? I can't.
Those are the FAQs. If you don't mind going to the other document, the PDF, that would be great. And
The
I can get
PDF first.
There's
Okay.
a slide presentation that's in PDF format. And it's not at the bottom. There we go.
Perfect.
You want to share, Denise?
That's the one. Yes. Thank you.
Great.
You can go ahead to the next slide, if you don't mind.
What's that?
You can
Oh,
just keep
okay.
scrolling through if you don't mind.
Let me know.
That's great. So thanks again, Denise Gibbons, member of the school committee, 8 Paddock Lane, resident here in Millis. Here tonight to give some information on one of the articles that's on the warrant for a feasibility study for the middle school, high school. And what we're hoping to talk through tonight is questions that the committee has, and also to give you background on how we got here to the feasibility study, partnership with the MSBA, who they are, what that means, what they bring to the table, the needs of the facility, what drove us to actually submit to the state in a request for funding, what a feasibility is, why does it cost what it does, what does that cost breakdown look like, and what's the output of a feasibility study. And then I'll address any questions along the way, at the end, however you'd like it, whenever you have them, just let me know, I'm happy to address those. And then just some next steps and ways to get additional information after this evening. So on an annual basis, the school committee reviews all the facilities that we have and then the needs we have within the building. As Mr. Barry mentioned earlier this evening, there are items for the schools and their facilities on the capital plan. They've been there for quite some time.
I don't understand how this study works.
Oh, we're getting a little bit of feedback from
Please
the
mute your
Zoom.
mics if you're on Mr. Leach, if you're on Zoom.
So over the course of the last year, in early 2021, we had discussions about needs in the middle high school. So as we all know, we're coming off of Clyde Brown. That project took us 6 years to complete. We were reminded last evening that it's actually been open for 4 years. So back when we started that project, our projection for renovations, hard to believe, our projection for renovation needs at the middle high school was anywhere between 8 to 10 years that would be coming back to the town and asking for funding related to renovations needed at the middle high school facility. So being within that time frame, we took a look at what the needs were. We had 2 facility studies that were done on the building. One in 2014, which was a district-wide review of both buildings.
Ms. Gibbons, would you hold on for 1 second? Deirdre, can you mute all participants on Zoom for the time being?
That's critical.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbons.
Thank you. So in 2014, we had an organization called Tetra Tech that came in and did an independent study of both buildings, forecasted financial needs and renovations for both of the facilities. In 2020, knowing that we had a roof at the middle high school and COVID had identified some HVAC issues that we had at the building as well, we secured an outside facility, thanks to funding from the town, to do just a study on those 2 systems up at the middle school, high school. So within this presentation, we'll talk through what their findings were and the dollar figures associated with the 2 of those. But based on what they came back with, part of our responsibility as a committee is to be fiscally minded in any dollars that we spend or that we ask the town for. So because we were staring at about $8.5 million worth of straight system replacements, that's between a roof, an HVAC, and some electrical work, it was apparent to us that it was time to start the process of requesting assistance from the state. With Clyde Brown, we had submitted for 5 years and were rejected in every year. So from 2008 to 2013, we submitted to the state to have their funding. You can stay right there, Deirdre, that's fine. Thank you. No, you're good. You're good right there. Thanks. We submitted for funding to the state and were rejected for 5 years in a row. After being rejected for 5 years, we said, we're going to turn our sights toward the middle high school, because the study that we had done in 2014 called a lot of issues on the table for that building. So we submitted to the state in 2014 for the middle school, high school. Lo and behold, some other school from the state's funding pool that was approved pulled out because they couldn't get funding from their town, and they invited us in for Clyde Brown. That's the only reason that we got in for the Clyde Brown School, for that funding opportunity. So in actuality, the middle school, high school has been top of mind since at least 2014 as far as the needs for the systems in the building. So we submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which is an independent state authority that takes 1 penny off of every dollar from the 6.25% sales tax in the state to derive their revenue. That's where they get it from. So over a 10-year period, they have put money back into state schools to the tune of $11.1 billion. So they have a steady stream of funding, and they are dedicated to ensuring that they support fiscally responsible, right-sized, educationally appropriate buildings. And to support that, they have a very rigorous process that begins with a feasibility study. So we submitted in the spring of 2021 for the middle school, high school, and we submitted for a renovation. So our statement of interest, I didn't include it in your packet, but happy to if you'd like it as a follow-up. The statement of interest is surrounding spatial needs and system repairs within the building. And the requests within it were focused solely on renovation. There's overcrowding in that building, even with the move of the 5th grade back to the Clyde Brown School. The MSBA has very strict guidelines on the number of classrooms that you should have for those types of buildings, the size of each classroom. We are small on both of those items. The building was built originally in the 60s. Immediately, there were additions added in the 70s, and the last renovation happened in 1998. So spatial requirements being as they were back then, we certainly don't meet those now. That's just a little history on the building itself, where it's been, and what this MSBA funding opportunity offers us and where they get their funds. Deirdre, if you don't mind going forward one, that would be great, and I'll catch up to you. So we've, March of 2022, the town is invited to participate in the funding partnership with the state. First phase of that is a feasibility study. So why is it important for us to do this now? A number that you'll continue to hear from me through the course of the evening, you'll see it in your packets, you'll see it in the FAQs. We do have $8.5 million worth of known costs that we're looking at. And what we're trying to do is proactively get in front of that so that we're not spending that money just on system repairs, but in partnership with the state and having their funds combined with our funds, that we're able to get some educational value out of the investment that the town puts into the building. The MSBA will pay us, or reimburse, I should say, anywhere between 45% to 50% of eligible costs for the project. They have a lot of requirements as to what is eligible. We are fortunate enough to have just come through this process with Clyde Brown School, which finished, thanks to the hard work of the Permanent Building Committee, finished well under budget and on time. And the MSBA was a fantastic partner, both in process and financially.
Ms. Gibbons, I'm
yes,
sorry to interrupt you, but
No, not at
I think it
all.
would be good for you, if you're able to describe, I'm not looking for every footnote, but eligible costs do not include site work, for instance. Or can you give
sure.
us a little bit of detail?
Yes.
So that point is not lost?
Yes. So Site work is, so there are certain costs that the MSBA says are just out of scope for what they will reimburse. I used an example last evening where if we decided that we wanted to put in an outdoor performance arena attached to the high school, they would tell us no. The perfect example from the Clyde Brown School is we had the desire to build a gymnasium that could hold some bleachers so that the gym could be a little bit bigger. We could rent it out, see some income from it, and have space for spectators. The additional 6 feet to make that gym bigger was ineligible to be reimbursed by the MSBA. So what do? We took the 6 feet out to make sure we got the full reimbursement from the MSBA. So part of the process of the MSBA and the process that the Permanent Building Committee goes through, and also the School Building Committee, which is one of the requirements of the MSBA process. It's the Town of Millis Permanent Building Committee, plus members of the school committee, the town administrator, and some other members in the community, school members, I apologize, school administration folks, but it has principals, school administrators, school business manager are as part of that. So it's their charge to ensure that in defining the scope and the design of the building, that we are maximizing the reimbursement 100%. So if we wanted to put administrative offices in, they would say, we will not pay you for that. If we wanted to put pickleball courts inside in the building, they would not reimburse us for that. So it's very specific. They also have some maximum amounts of reimbursement for specific areas that they'll reimburse us for.
Thank you.
Sure. So the MSBA provides funding, they provide process. If we were to, so they also, there's no option for us as a town to defer the invitation. So once you're invited, you either accept or decline. You can't say, we'd like to push it out for a year or any period of time. If we chose to decline the offer, if the town decides to vote against it, then we would go back into the pool with all of the other school districts within the state, and then we would wait to see when our number comes up again, if you will. This year, there were 58 districts that applied. The MSBA chose 17 projects, one of which was Millis's, and they chose it based off of urgent need and, it was urgent need was what they chose it based off of. So we hit that mark based on their review of all of the submissions. And then, like I said, the number that you'll continue to hear is either way, with or without the MSBA funding, there's $8.5 million of costs that will be coming to the town at some point. We're hoping, again, to do it proactively and not reactively when the roof is in such bad condition that we actually have to come. Even as it is, the feasibility study will take anywhere between 8 to 24 months to complete. I'll talk in a couple of slides about all of the different elements that happen within that time period. A full project from beginning to end averages about 6 years. Clyde Brown came in right about that. So from a financial perspective, outside of this 1.3, but from if we were to go down this route, if there was an option that the town approved, the financial implications to taxpayers would happen 6 years from around this time period. So what's in the building, what's happening that we need to have state assistance. So I mentioned it earlier, like I said, there's HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC. I needed that description for myself. At $5.4 million, that item is on the capital plan. On the capital plan, you'll see it as 5.6 because it actually combines the HVAC and the electrical together. So we have them broken out here because they're just a little bit different. The company that we use, CBI Engineering, who did that roof and HVAC study, they actually gave us 2 quotes for HVAC replacement, 5.6 and 9.3. 9.3 is a more robust, energy efficient, addresses areas like the cafeteria, the auditorium, the gymnasium. It has a building management system similar to what we have at Clyde Brown. We could run both buildings off of the same system. Much more robust, thus much more costly. So what we have in the capital plan, we submitted both items. Capital planning took the 5.6 option, so to be consistent with what's been on the capital plan, we wanted to include the 5.6 here. Roof replacement, it's a full replacement. It is, as is HVAC, well beyond their useful life. It's a phrase we got to all be very familiar with the Clyde Brown. We're in the same situation with a lot of large items up at the middle high school. And then we know that we also have security upgrades, technology upgrades, and other smaller items related to systems that are not included in that 8.5. But there's two really big ticket items that really create that large cost. So space, it's a common theme. I said it before, the number of classrooms, the size of the classrooms. As Millis tends to do, we maximize every existing facility that we have. And there's closet spaces that are turned into therapy rooms. There's closet spaces that serve as offices. The library in the afternoon is middle school classroom space. Therapy happens in the library during some periods as well. Prep time for teachers and independent learning for students happens in the hallway. So we're tight on space. We have 3 teachers across the combination of both buildings that don't have dedicated classrooms. So they're on a cart, they're mobile throughout the course of the day. STEAM, which is science.
Ms. Gibbons?
Yes, go ahead.
Hold on one second. Deirdre, could you go to the next slide?
Oh, sorry, thanks.
It's okay.
Mr. Ruby. It looks to be stuck, Deirdre, if you don't mind scrolling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. I got it wrong when we did Clyde Brown. I was right on it here. Right on the cusp, thank you. There's no space for that. The staff is doing amazing things with the students. They don't have flexibility in space, flexibility in furniture. They don't have a lot of space in order to be doing projects that require students to get out of their chair and to build things. There's not maker space, which is I'm collaborating with other students, and I'm actually making something to help support the education, the educational topic that we're working through in the classroom. I mentioned already teacher prep and meeting space, and the cafeteria. So school starts at 8:05, if I have it right. First lunch period happens at 10:45. School ends at 2 o'clock. Last lunch period happens at 12:45. We just don't have space to be able to have a couple of hours where we have lunch. So part of this would address those needs as well. So for the feasibility study, as is in the warrant, it's 1.3. Sorry, Deirdre, would you mind scrolling down to the next slide? Thank you very much. Perfect, thank you. What is in the 1.3 estimate? First, I'll talk a little bit about how we got to the estimate. So our formal engagement with the MSBA started on July 1st. That was the first day of the entry for us into the feasibility phase. And part of our discussions with the MSBA, we asked them, we said, could you send us some recent projects and what their feasibility budgets were? So they sent us similar size, we're actually a little bit on the lower side of some of them, projects and what their feasibility funding allocations were. In addition to that, we ourselves looked at the last few years of feasibility studies that the MSBA has partnered with in surrounding towns around the area and took a look at those to see what those numbers look like. And third, and likely most important, is we talked to an outside consultant that we were fortunate enough to work with on the Clyde Brown, whose role is to manage these projects, and asked him what he was seeing, and based on what we were looking to do and the timing, they were all comfortable with the $1.3 million price tag. Within that 1.3, it's not in the presentation, but I'll break it out for you. There's a recipe, if you will, of the breakdown of the money. So 20% of the 1.3, which is $260,000, is for project management. The feasibility study would engage a project management firm It would engage a design and engineering firm, and what they would do is they would perform multiple studies in conjunction with the school district on educational plan, the desires of what they would like to see in the school. There would be traffic studies, there would be facility studies, a slew of studies. They eat up the biggest part of the budget, which is 65%. So on this quote, it would be $845,000 would be related to design and engineering fees. At the close of the feasibility study, we would have reusable assets. So, sorry, Deirdre, you can keep it there. I'm sorry. Perfect, thank you. At the close of the feasibility study, we have a lot of reusable assets. So we'd have schematic designs from the design firm for multiple options that they would come up with for the town to be able to review. Those are approximately at 70% complete by the time we exit feasibility study. In addition, there's another 10% of the 1.3 that's allocated for environmental studies. I think we've all been down the road enough to know how important that those are, so there's money in the budget. There's money in the budget allocated and earmarked for that. And then, as any good project will do, there's a contingency bucket, which is 5%, which comes out to $65K. So for that $1.3 million, that's really the estimation of where a lot of that money goes. So again, at the close of it, we'd have schematic designs. There would be multiple options for the town to be able to review and provide feedback on, much in the way that we did it with Clyde Brown. Again, the statement of interest that the town submitted was for renovation. So the process that the MSBA has us go through is they look at multiple options. So they'll look at multiple ways to renovate. They will likely look at what would be included what would be included for a new building if it was feasible to do that. They came on site. We talked to them. They know our intentions as far as renovation. Again, that's exactly what was outlined in the statement of interest. So we would have multiple options at the close of the feasibility study to be able to share with the town, get feedback, and then potentially come to a final option to put forward. Thank you, Deirdre. So again, with benefits of working with the MSBA, funding is clearly the largest driver here. So 45 to 50% of eligible project costs. That gets refined during the course of the feasibility study. So we would know within the feasibility study timeframe what our exact reimbursement percentage would be. It's not a question mark. It's not always a range, but there are other factors that go into that all get clarified throughout the feasibility study. So we'd be able to come back to the town with a solid percentage number. Again, I talked about their prescriptive process, and really it ensures that we're building the right space. So much in the way of the gym example that I gave, they don't want you to build a building that is too big by any stretch. So it is just as important for them if they have size requirements on the small side, they also have them to make sure that we're not overbuilding. So they have learned from past projects in other towns that they need to be strict on both ends of the building size spectrum. And again, the timing, our hope is we know these items are coming due. By going through this process with the MSBA now, we're hoping to get in front of the large replacement costs and have more value for the taxpayer dollar by partnering with the state and trying to maximize every penny that's spent. We're very sensitive to where we are as a town, the amount of taxes, understanding the timeliness of this. It definitely was something that, we'll be honest, like we thought it would be. We were very fortunate to get, on the first try of submission, an invitation from the state. We did not think it was going to go that way based on past experience, which, so we want to take advantage of the opportunity while it's here because it may not come around again or in the time that we need it, knowing the needs that we have within the building. Thank you, Deirdre. So next steps. So we're here this evening. Again, thank you for your time. We'll be at the select board meeting on Monday evening. I'll Happily come back next week to answer any questions as you continue discussions about warrant article items. And then the feasibility study article is on the town warrant for town meeting. And then Deirdre, if you don't mind scrolling down through the next slide, we just included some information if the town has additional questions, you can email the school committee. There'll be FAQs. The committee has them in their packet this evening. We'll be sending those out on the listserv later in the week, and then also posting on the school website. And we're also hoping to send those out on the town listserv as well, not just to the school community. We want to make sure that all of the taxpayers and the voters are aware of what's happening. So with that,
Okay.
happy to
Thank
answer
you,
any questions.
Ms. Gibbons. I've got a couple of comments, and then
Sure.
certainly everybody will have questions, I'm sure. A couple things. You definitely made emphasis to renovation, and I sense that there's also a little bit of addition that's potential.
sorry.
Could you just characterize, again, I'm not looking for specific square footage,
Oh, sure.
but just some of the space requirements and what could the addition costs entail, and how much, rough space?
Sure. So thanks for mentioning that. Renovation addition is what we put into the statement of interest. The study that we had done in 2014 was focused on spatial needs within the building. What their recommendations were, even though it was back in 2014, it still seems relevant at this time. I will caveat all of this by saying the purpose of the feasibility study is for us to have an opportunity to have professional design and engineers come in and tell us what the best options are for the building. So, and costs are not for us to estimate at this time. That's a byproduct of going through the feasibility study. So I won't be able to provide anything related to cost estimates. But what we have looked at in the past through this Tetra Tech study were 5 classrooms, and they even thought that those would go on top of the existing cafeteria space. There is some space that we have purposefully kept to remain parking lot, so that there would potentially be some room for future expansion or renovation addition at some point in the future. So that's really the scope of what has been looked at to date. But knowing that we would start from scratch with this process, using those as foundational elements just to help inform the design team that would come on board. But that's what's been looked at in the past as far as the scope of additional space that would be required.
Okay, all right. I've got 2 or 3 more questions. Could you provide us for next week, before our meeting next week, the population graph of the school?
Sure.
Projected for, say, the next, I guess the past 10 to out to the next 10, 20, whatever you have, whatever, the best you can.
Sure.
Fields and athletic facilities, specifically outdoor facilities, in or out of MSBA funding eligibility or a percentage?
To be determined. To be determined. So our intent going in is that it is looked at as part of the feasibility study for field up at middle high school. So the single track football is what we've said coming out of the gate. As we secure project management, design firm, we'll have conversations with them to see, A, if that's appropriate, B, what kind of money it would cost to take a look at those things, and C, if the scope of that should be increased rather to look at other fields, i.e. town park. So it is our hope that we could include items that would benefit the community in addition to the school. So having a track that the entire community could take advantage of would be something that we would hope we might be able to take a look at here. We're unsure of where the MSBA stands on reimbursement on that, so if it falls into the reimbursable bucket or not. We don't know. We didn't look at it as part of Clyde Brown, so I don't know from past experience there. But it is something that we have on the scope for us to look at through feasibility study.
Okay. And I will do this for all of the presenters for tonight, but I would invite a rep from the school committee to attend our meeting next week, because we will be discussing this at length. Forgive the expression, but there'll be an opportunity for you to see the sausage being made. We'll have, if there are questions, I don't want to be left where we're waiting for an answer. We need to discuss and vote these things and have a knowledgeable person here next week, so.
I will happily attend next week. Thank you for the
bring-
invitation.
Bring some coffee,
Okay.
okay?
For the
And,
whole group?
That'd be nice, but no, just for yourself. Mr.
Donuts.
Stebbins, thank you.
Donuts, okay.
No.
No.
First, Ms. Gibbons, I found your Q&A extremely informative. That is really well done, and I read that this afternoon, and it answered 90% of my questions. The one question I do have, will the MSBA contribute anything toward the payment for feasibility study?
Oh, excellent question. Sorry, I didn't address it earlier. Yes, they will. It is contingent upon us voting into being in the program in the next phase. So we would have to select one of the options that we came to at the end of the feasibility
Right.
study. Should we go down that path, then yes, whatever percentage
Okay.
that we determine, they would fund.
So we have to fund it up front.
Correct.
And you anticipate there will be some reimbursement, but you can't guarantee that.
Absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent presentation.
Mr. Underhill.
I'd like to second, or third, great presentation. Really, everything was put together. Just one question about the lifespan of the HVAC roof and electrical. Will they last the 6 years if approved?
Excellent question. One that we just discussed as recently as last night. We continue to patch, fix, do what we need to do to make ourselves get through each year. Our assumption is, and our hope is, yes, but I can't guarantee it. So we're certainly hoping, absolutely right, that's where we are. That's where we are.
And just for clarification, I just did some quick math based off of your presentation tonight. So just taking that 8.5 million of required, that's the floor, not the ceiling, because that's what this study is for. And then if we get a 50% reimbursement, that's 4.25 million. Minus our 1.3 million for our cost, for the investment of 1.3 million, we potentially could recoup 2.95 million. And that number could go up depending on how much we get reimbursed for the feasibility study and how much more deficiencies are found during the
Yes.
study. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's okay. Thank you.
Well, we're talking dollars and cents. There was a number of $30 to $70 million referenced earlier. Would you comment on that?
Sure. There have been no estimates related to middle school, high school, scope of renovation, scope of project, the dollar figures associated with what that might look like. I'm not able to comment on cost at this time whatsoever. So we don't know the scope of what would be going into the building outside of what I've shared with you this evening. Those are the known costs that we have. We know that if we do addition, that it would add to that, obviously, but the known scope is exactly how you saw it this evening in the presentation and what you have in the documentation.
There's a sum of the indefinite number that the Capital Planning Committee presented earlier of $18 million. Would you say that that is in the realm of possibility? That number is, you're not objecting to that number?
I don't endorse that number, nor do I object to that number. So I have to stay completely cost neutral here. So in speaking with Mr. Conroy, who's the current school committee representative on the Capital Planning Committee, I think was looking for some type of placeholder for what we think it might cost for the building. That was a $10 million figure, and then there was the 8 of the existing costs. So if I take the 2 of those together and put them together, I think that that's what gets us to the 18. I really and truly believe that it is too early to discuss total costs that we are looking at for the renovation of the building.
I'm not looking to discredit anybody. I'm just looking to set the record straight that
Absolutely.
30 to 70 million is probably not an accurate figure. If somebody can validate it, they're welcome to come forward, but, okay. All right, please, keep going with your questions. None heard. Thank you very much.
I will see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Mr. Gazinski.
Well, they should have a presentation. from the administration to do that.
Would you lead us through the warrant by exception? If there's items on here that haven't changed, or that you know that we, well, just lead us by exception, and we'll let you know if we take exception to that and if we need you to stop, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would begin by saying there really are no new articles or changed articles on the warrant since your last meeting, since the select board has not met since your last meeting, so there would not be any changes. There are some, I did distribute a first draft of motions to the committee, so you should have that at your desk this evening. So there's been some small tweaks to a few of the numbers. Prior year bills, I think it changed slightly. Maybe some of the other numbers have been filled in, but you'll see on the motions, the real information added this evening is the funding sources for all the articles. If you read the motions, you'll see the anticipated funding sources for all those articles. Be happy to answer any questions you have about that.
Mr. Gazinski, would you object to us going through some of these and having the committee vote on these tonight, if
No
we're able to?
objections. It's your
Otherwise,
meeting, Mr. Chair.
we're in.
I'm simply
okay.
one of your guests,
Well,
so I'd be happy.
You are, but you do have a home, and it's not close to here, so, okay. I will entertain a motion on Article 1.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 1 in the amount of $14,083.67, of which $7,281.44 would come from free cash, $4,300.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, no,
I think, are you looking at the motions?
I'm not.
Yes, I would recommend you look at the motions,
Because that's a different
because that was
figure.
one of the ones that was slightly tweaked.
So throw this out?
So I would go by your motion.
Keep it, but we'll make
If you're looking-
motions
if you're
off of
looking
the
for-
draft.
Yeah, I would go off,
Oh, yeah,
I would
you moved
recommend
it
going
around
off the
a little.
motions. It's a small amount, but still for accuracy.
Okay.
All right, so amending my motion here, in the amount of $14,119.65, of which $7,317.42 would come from free cash, $2,419.11 would come from sewer enterprise reserves, and $4,383.12 would come from water enterprise reserves, as listed in the warrant.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, the committee vote to approve previous unpaid bills in the amount of $14,119.65, of which $7,317.42 from free cash, $2,419.11 from sewer enterprise reserves, and $4,383.12 from water enterprise reserves. Discussion. I'll start the discussion by saying that the particular bills that are listed here appear to be in line. They are, unpaid bills are bills that are received after the closeout or after Springtown meeting. And then this is a routine article, and essentially, these are bills that the town has already received the services and need to be paid. Any further discussion? None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Article 2.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 2, that will transfer from marijuana impact fees as part of free cash, the sum of $204,285.42 for additional wages and expenses that were not sufficiently funded under Article 3 and Article 6 of the operating budgets at the May 2nd, 2022 annual town meeting, with the individual amounts as written in the warrant.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the expenditure of marijuana impact funds, free cash in the sum of $204,285.42 for the following items: administrative support to HCA, $9,200, social work services for the entire community, $35,000, school resource officer salary, $40,678.92, a teen program coordinator in the amount of $11,960, a school adjustment counselor, one full-time equivalent of $71,631,000, and a social emotional program teacher, one full-time equivalent, or FTE, for $35,815.50. Discussion. I will just start the discussion by saying that I don't particularly care for the language that says not sufficiently funded. It was not funded by choice. Those expenditures were broken out in six-month increments, and likely also to do with the receipt or the revenue of HCA dollars. So these are not new requirements per se. It's not like when you say sufficiency or insufficiency, you kind of have a connotation there that is not appropriate or not accurate in this sense. So any further discussion? Okay, none heard. We'll go to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it, 9-0.
Mr. Chairman, on the next article, I will have that information for you prior to your next meeting, so I probably just recommend that you pass over this one for tonight.
We shall.
We'll have the details for that for you for your next meeting.
Okay. We shall. Article 4, I know that Mr. Barry gave his presentation tonight. The Capital Planning Committee is meeting tomorrow night to finalize its report and inputs, and so I would recommend we will defer Article 4. Article 5. Any inputs to Article 5, Mr. Gazinski?
Just to say, this was forwarded to us again from the Baseball Association for repairs to the field, which were exacerbated by the drought and lack of ability to properly water the field. And this, as shown here, would be from free cash, would be the funding.
Okay. Are you aware of any other requests coming to the town?
We did receive a request from the Softball Association requesting up to $40,000 for repairs to those fields. I believe the Select Board will be discussing that at their meeting next Monday.
Would your intent be to add an article or modify this article? Or what do you think? What will you recommend to the Select Board?
That is a good question. The board will discuss that on Monday. I think it'll probably be an additional article. But certainly if the Finance Committee has any thoughts on that,
Okay.
we carry those back, but I think that a representative of the Softball Association will be coming to the meeting, I believe, to discuss that.
So I'm gonna recommend I'll take a motion on this, and if we need to change it next week, we will. And then as a comment, I am not gonna vote on this article. I'll recuse myself, not for personal interest, but because I'm on the Millis Baseball Board.
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
I
McGinnis?
have through you a question for Mr. Gazinski. When a department or a group asks for money, we usually get all these forms that come with it, the need, the reasons, what resources they used. Did they go to the CPC, the other CPC? What volunteer efforts are being done? Is that appropriate for an outside group like this, or is that strictly for departments?
Well, we usually get that information for a formal capital project. We do oftentimes get some backup information if there's any type of request for funding of any kind. The information we have really is a letter outlining the need, as well as some documentation on the condition of the fields. Again, you know, we may gather some more information prior to town meeting, but that's the information we've gathered to date.
Thank you.
Mr. Lohr?
Mr. Kaczynski, with the baseball request and the softball request, is there enough cash to accommodate both, or would decisions have to be made to accommodate or modify the amounts?
We believe there is sufficient funding through free cash to accommodate both at the fall town meeting.
Mr. Duffy?
Jim Duffy, Exchange Street. I would advocate that potentially the synergies of the two requests be looked at, because the sum may be not 60,000, might be 40,000 if the same company did both. I don't know what the scope of the additional request is, but should be some consideration.
I think that input has merit. Mr. Stedman?
I'm concerned we're going to have a marathon meeting, so anything you can do to combine and reduce articles might save it, 5-10 minutes in the town meeting, and it looks like it's going to go perhaps to midnight, so.
Duly noted. I will forward that thought to the select board.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr.
we
Kaczynski,
will-
Mr. Chair?
Ms.
Sorry.
McGinnis?
Has there been any thought from the select board as to maintenance of this? So will the DPW be taking it over? Will it be watered once the sod comes in? Is it too late to do this year?
There has been some discussion on that. I am not a landscaper by trade, so I can't say the success rate for moving forward with this in the fall and how well that'll hold. There has been discussion about the need in some form or other to be able to water this next year, even if we have a drought and a water ban, to find ways to do that, whether it's through, the purchase of water from outside the DEP-regulated system. But obviously, I think water would be a lot cheaper than these types of repairs, so I think that will be discussed.
I can add to that, that the contractor has said that the work, sod or turfing the field, can occur well into November and perhaps later. And Mr. McKay did say that there is a gray area where certain exceptions can be made to if there is a state mandated water ban, that there potentially is opportunity to apply water.
Did he mention what those exceptions were, Mr. Chair?
I don't have specifics.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lohr?
In regards to, in the vein of having the town meeting go efficiently and smoothly and quickly, I think it would be best to have a couple of items in terms of what the breakdown is. So for example, I know a softball field is primarily dirt. That's all I know. So I'm curious to see what the 40,000 would represent. And if we can get ahead of that, that might help facilitate the process a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to, we'll defer this. We'll wait for the presentation to the select board next week on Monday, and we will take up this article and potentially any other articles next week. Okay? Thank you. Article 6, we will defer. Article 7 will defer.
Why do we want to defer 6? Oh, no, never mind. I thought it was.
I mean, you're ambitious, I know,
Never
Mr.
mind,
Stedman,
no,
but-
never mind. I thought it was something else.
All right.
Happens to all of us.
6 and 7 will defer.
Yep.
Article 8,
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 8, which would provide a real estate tax exemption for Gold Star families.
Second.
No, you said-
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve Article 8, which is a real estate tax exemption for Gold Star families. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Article is approved unanimously. Recommended for approval unanimously. Article 9.
Quick question.
Mr. Duffy.
Question, Jim Duffy, Exchange Street, Millis. Question
Mr. Duffy, Jim, he's, what is it? What's Exchange Street? What's your
Exchange
address?
Street.
Okay, go ahead. Nobody.
343, 345. I own both. Question's gonna come up, what's this gonna cost the town? So I think it'd be good to have some numbers here that says this is really what.
Mr. Underhill?
Mr. Duffy, I've actually been in communications with the Veteran Services Officer to get an exact idea of the cost to the town. He's going to get back to me on
Okay.
that. But the state will pay 50% of the cost for 5 years at any point a Gold
Oh,
Star
that's
family
even
moves
better,
into
but then
town.
come across here, right? So
Right,
that's
exactly. So that'll
great.
be part of my presentation. It's a great point. And at this point, there is only one Gold Star family in the town,
Okay.
so.
Ms. Johnson?
There's not a gold star, for this provision, we do not actively have, this would be for a parent. We do have one gold star that qualifies for a different.
Oh, for
A
you.
one.
spouse.
It's a spousal one, and the town does not need to vote on that.
It doesn't, oh.
Yeah,
It
that's a
automatically
22D.
happens for the spouse?
That's a 22D.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
is a 22H, which is for parents.
So immediately, there would be no cost.
No
But
cost.
if someone were to qualify, you know, it would be the, you know, the loss of that property, real estate insurance, real estate taxes, plus,
So-
minus the 50% reimbursement from the state.
Right.
Ms. Johnson, would you stay proximate to the microphone? Okay, so moving on to Article 9.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 9, which will reduce the residency requirement for local real estate tax exemptions for veterans from current 2 years to 1 year, to be in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 9, changes to the local real estate tax exemptions for veterans, reducing the requirement of residency for 2 years to 1. Discussion. Ms. Johnston, is there a cap on either number of residents or dollars that can go towards this?
As far as I know, there is no cap. On these, it would be, there are specific amounts for each one of the veterans exemptions that they qualify for.
Okay.
So they would be available if you looked on the website, under the assessors, or if you were to look under veterans, under the mass.gov website, they would tell you what the exemptions would be.
Okay, and do you know how much the town currently expends towards this particular exemption? What it costs?
I don't off the top of my head. We can have that information for you next week.
Would you please? Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Article 10. Article 10, this is a settlement, okay. Not the one that was, there was another one, a water, FEMA or water one that was removed, sorry. Okay, I'll take a motion on Article 10.
Can I ask a question?
You certainly may, Ms. Garzon.
So is this just the anticipated settlement amount, or is this there's a proposed settlement and this would cover that amount?
There is a proposed settlement, and this would cover that, as well as provide funding for the Phase 2 report.
Okay.
Which is required by the DEP. So this should cover both those items. So
Okay.
this should resolve the issue with the current adjacent property owner and allow us to meet the current requirements of the DEP as part of this environmental remediation.
So the remediation would be the responsibility of the current property owner, I'm assuming, and this would be to provide funds for that remediation?
The remediation would be the responsibility of the town, since the leak occurred on town property a long, long time ago. But under the DEP regulations, the property that had the leak is responsible for any movement of that contaminant to other adjacent properties. So even though some of the work will need to be done, testing and so forth on the adjacent property, that is the responsibility of the town, because I believe, from our understanding, is there was an underground gasoline tank at that location.
And so we haven't undertaken a phase 2 yet.
Correct. This will initiate the Phase 2 report.
So there could be more work that would need to be done once that
Yes.
phase 2 is done.
Yes, the Phase 2 would take a year or more. And then oftentimes these, depending on the amount of environmental issues, it could just be continued monitoring, or
Right.
might require some additional removal of soils. We believe at this point that it's probably just monitoring, but we can't know for sure.
Okay.
Mr. Lohr?
No, the question was answered.
Ms. McGinnis?
No, I crossed my fingers, I
No,
didn't
no,
raise
that
my
was the
hand.
symbol. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 10 in the amount of $85,000 that would be transferred from free cash for an environmental impact settlement and Phase 2 report for the property located at 12 to 14 Exchange Street.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The committee vote to recommend approval of Article 10, transfer from free cash the sum of $85,000 for environmental impact statement and Phase 2 report for property located at 12 to 14 Exchange Street. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 11.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 11 in the amount of $25,000, which would come from marijuana impact fees as part of free cash that would reimburse Advesa for its initial deposit related to its HCA agreement with the town.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve Article 11, transfer the sum of $25,000 for marijuana impact fees, free cash to reimburse Advesa for initial deposit-related HCA agreement with the town. Discussion. It's my understanding that the town entered into an agreement with Advesa for some sort of marijuana operation, approved marijuana operation in town, which then somewhat fell apart, and this is a reimbursement from from basically a separate agreement than the one that everybody's familiar with, ComCan agreement. They're separate agreements.
Yeah, Advesa had its own agreement with the town, and as part of that, they were required to put down a $25,000 upfront payment as part of that HCA agreement. But based on our discussions with town council, since they have withdrawn from the project, the town is responsible for returning that deposit.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. McGinnis?
maybe we can make the next one non-refundable?
Keep that in mind. If you
Noted.
have anyone else knocking at the door.
Any further discussion? None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 12.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 12 in the amount of $128,721.70, which would transfer from free cash to fully fund the remaining deficit of the FY22 snow and ice.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 12, which is a transfer from free cash, the sum of $128,721.70 to fully fund the FY22 snow and ice deficit. Discussion. I'll just note that this is one of the only areas that the town is allowed to operate in deficit from FY22 into FY23 due to unknown,
Mother Nature.
due to Mother Nature and unpredictability of the snow and ice control effort. The town added like $75,000 or somewhat, some amount of money because we had routinely been way under budget. And typically, if that were to happen, that would happen in the spring during discussion of the operating budget. In this case, this is just catching up with those bills from last year. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon?
So also for any new voters or those of us who are new to the committee, as I understand it, once we set a snow and ice budget in the town, we can't reduce it in future years. So that's why we run a deficit, praying for a good snow year. You know, not being overly optimistic to then, you know, shoot ourselves in the foot later. So, you know, 128 is not historically a bad number for us to have run. It's better than having, you know, a lot of money in the budget that we don't spend and we can never reduce. So this is the way we've decided to run it, but we did ratchet it up a little bit a few years back because it was really running way over budget.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 13.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 13 in the amount of $139,000, which will pay costs associated with the lead line service inventory and replacement plan. And this would be through, as I understand it, borrowing to begin with, and then that would be refunded through a grant. But at this point, it would be appropriated through borrowing at this town meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The committee vote to recommend approval of Article 13 for a lead line service inventory and replacement plan in the amount of $139,000 through enterprise or free cash?
Borrowing.
Debt.
Borrowing.
But it would
It'd
be
be enterprise.
enterprise borrowing.
That was gonna be my question.
Water
Okay.
enterprise.
So
Yes,
water
right here.
enterprise borrowing. Okay.
Water enterprise borrowing in the amount of $139,000, of which, once the work is completed, the town anticipates receiving a grant to reimburse that borrowing. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 14.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I recommend approval of Article 14, that the town would transfer from water enterprise reserves the amount of $56,864 for Water Management Act permit renewal support.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The committee vote to recommend approval of Article 14, transfer from Water Enterprise Reserves the sum of $56,864 for Water Management Act permit renewal support. Discussion.
Do we have more?
Mr. Kaczynski, could you just give us a little, refresh our memories, because Mr. McKay did speak to this, and I
So
could
this
go
is-
through my notes, but you don't want me to.
Yeah, this is part of the DEP's process where they make us have a new permit, I believe, every 10 years. And they are attempting to put some further restrictions on the town, which we are not in full agreement with. So we would like to bring on the services of Kleinfelder to work with us and to help us negotiate with the DEP an agreement or an act for permit renewal more in line with what the town is seeking.
So this would help us, to help the town, more or less, and I don't want to put in this word, but I'm not that eloquent, dispute what is being proposed for our permit, or our water discharge or water usage
Right.
restrictions and conditions.
The consultant will help us build the case with DEP as to why some of their proposed changes to the permit should not go into effect.
Right.
So that's really how we're addressing that.
Right. And if I recall, Mr. McKay was talking about, changes to watering days, watering
Being
at
able to
all.
sell water.
Selling.
Yep, okay. That answers my question and refreshes my memory. Mr. Duffy?
Relative to a quick and efficient meeting, I would advocate that the merits of this $56,000 and what it's about get published or, I don't know the right word, put out to the
Explained.
town people to,
Yeah.
so that we don't have a whole bunch
So-
of questions as to why do we have to do this? And quite honestly, some of the dire elements of what DEP, is that the right? Of what they're actually telling us that
Yep.
we should be doing. This is why we need the money to argue with it.
Yeah.
I accept your input, and I'm looking at Mr. John Stedman, and I think he is the man for the job.
Yeah, I'm the one that'll be presenting this, and as I
Typically-
recall, there are three things that the state is looking to do. One is to significantly reduce the amount that we can extract from our wells, because they're looking at what we've historically extracted, and not looking at the growth. And then our current permit allows the town to sell water to the city of Franklin, or town, whichever they are. They want to remove that, so that we don't have the ability to sell that water. And the third thing, as our chair said, is the watering restrictions, regardless of drought conditions, would only be 2 days a week, half the people based on odd and even or whatever. So it's significant for the amount of water that we can use to water our lawns.
Right, and unfortunately, it's one of the greater resources of the community, is the amount of water we have, and DEP is really trying to clamp down on how we can use that, and in what amount. So for those that have a concern about the water restrictions already in place, I would think they should be supportive of this to at least help us from having really tougher restrictions put into place, which will make it harder to utilize water for the citizens of the community, so.
I'll be advocating that the Millis Youth Baseball Board vote in favor of this.
As a quick aside, if you plant a tomato plant in the middle of the infield, you can water it.
That is true.
That's
Have to
where
be
my
tomato.
garden
Most
goes.
most of our kids won't eat them, so. Anyway, Mr. Stedman, my point is that, your point is well taken.
Yes.
My point is that our discussion comments should thoroughly explain the pros and cons and why, this very discussion during
Right.
town meeting discussion and pre-town meeting. So pre-town meeting will definitely be covering these items. And that is scheduled for, don't have it in front of me,
November 2nd.
November 2nd. Okay?
If I might.
Please.
I understand. It's my opinion. Most of the public isn't hearing what happens here. Right?
As
So-
evidenced by you are here and they are not. But they may be online.
Understood, but the more that can get published beforehand to educate them,
It's true.
the better.
Point taken. Thank you. Mr. Underhill?
I just had a question for Mr. Gazinski. You mentioned Kleinfelder. Why Kleinfelder? If I remember correctly, they were part of designing our original PFAS treatment plant and then implementing the treatment plant, and now they're again here representing the town. Do we have a contract with them? Do we have a bidding process for this? They just seem to keep popping up.
Yeah, Kleinfelder is an expert in our systems, and their work is exempt from that part of the procurement process. And we do use other consultants in other areas, but because of their knowledge of our system, I would say they are most definitely the best ones to advocate for us in this case. But certainly, it's a good point going forward. We have looked at other companies and have used other companies for things, Brown and Caldwell and a few other companies. But again, in this area, I would certainly recommend we use a company that's extremely familiar with the community. But
I'd just like to recommend caution against single-source vendors. At some point, their institutional knowledge owns you.
I hear you, and I've had these situations in years past in a number of towns I've worked in, so I appreciate the caution. And
Thank you.
we do make sure they keep their pencils sharpened. So
Thank
we do have conversations with them often about that.
Yeah, they do.
Any further discussion on Article 14? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 15.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 15, which will transfer $165,000 from water enterprise reserves for the preliminary design of a PFAS treatment plant at well number 3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 15, the transfer of $165,000 from water enterprise reserves for preliminary design of PFAS treatment plant at well number 3. Discussion. If you recall, when the town appropriated and approved via approval at town meeting, Springtown meeting, there was discussion that if that work, that effort would evaluate whether or not future or other PFAS treatment plants were needed, in addition to the one that's being currently constructed for wells 1 and 2, and that work has been done. And as a result of, one, the need or the wisdom of having redundancy or backup capability to treat water or to discharge, to supply water, and the PFAS readings at well 3, that it's prudent to pursue that now. And the likely outcome of this is we are headed down the road of considering another appropriation for another PFAS treatment system at well 3. So the town could end up with, in the next several years, 2 of these treatment systems, which would put us in fairly good shape compared to those that haven't taken any action on their PFAS, if they so have it. One of the things that Mr. McKay mentioned is that the state has added, DEP has added 29 new chemicals to its PFAS substance list. So the PFAS, in my opinion, is not something that's going away. The requirement to treat water, the state is one of the most stringent in terms of the measuring and the requirements and the sampling and testing. So we're sitting in, unfortunately, this is expensive, but we're in good shape. It's one of the, in my opinion, and the opinion of others, including the select board, that the provision to, or the requirement to provide water to its citizens, clean drinking water, is one of our most basic responsibilities for the town. So I'll be voting for this. Any further discussion? Okay, none heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Article 16,
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 16, which will appropriate $150,000 from sewer enterprise funds and $100,000 from stormwater reserves that will pay the costs associated with an asset management program, Phase 3, purchase and development of a sewer and stormwater asset management system. And would also, it would also authorize the borrowing of $150,000 for this. So which one would it be? Just,
So this is the same situation that we have with the lead piping, that through the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, the town will be given 100% principal forgiveness loan to provide for this. It's a $250,000 project, but Massachusetts Clean Water Trust is only going to do a $150,000 loan. So we would have to pay the $100,000 ourselves from the Stormwater Enterprise, and then we would take a $150,000 loan through the sewer enterprise, but we would also reduce the budget from the sewer enterprise by the $150,000. this current year's budget.
So,
This is a little tricky just because they're only going to fund
Explaining that one.
60% of the 250,000. So that's why it's
So
it's a
we've
little
already,
wordy.
the town already appropriated the 150,000 in the spring budget for the, from the sewer enterprise for this project. The project is actually 250,000, but in order to get the $150,000 grant, we have to change the appropriation from a straight appropriation to a borrowing.
okay, so this would be,
It's 150,000 borrowing under the sewer enterprise, and the current 150,000 appropriation, that will go back into the reserves. And then there's an actual 100,000 appropriation from the stormwater reserves.
okay, so our motion here would be to recommend approval of Article 16, which would,
It says appropriates at the top, this is the bond council's language. If you look below, it then says, and that to meet this appropriation, and then it talks about the borrowing. So it's a little play on words, and I totally appreciate it's confusing.
I'm going to interject and just say, we'll defer, and we'll clarify, and we'll do a little bit of homework. This is Kathy's article, but she'll get some help, I know, from you and from Finance Director, and perhaps from Jody and Bond Counsel, and there's no reason that we...
Makes sense to me, Mr. Chair.
It does? Well, yeah.
Ms. Johnson,
You're the one
to
who
you
has to
too?
read
I know,
this motion.
I make a motion that we approve this.
yeah, it would be, I mean, I would assume that we would have a lot of questions about this, because the way it's written is it from enterprise funds? Is it borrowing? How much is the borrowing? How much?
Let's wait a week. I'm not comfortable right now. Mr.
I
Duffy.
mean, I can answer those questions, but I would say that I agree that the language, and we're having bond counsel review this again, just to make sure that the motion language is as they need it. But we're doing like 3 or 4 steps within this one motion, and that's why I understand it is.
Let's just be
it's
able to
confusing.
make the motion here as best we can, regardless of the language in this particular motion. So let's just give ourselves, it's no big deal. It's one article that we're deferring.
So just to, so everybody's aware, we do need the project to be approved for $250,000. Ultimately, that's it. And of that $250,000, we will get, $150,000 has to be borrowed, and then we will be given a 0% principal forgiveness loan.
And we
for the
still need to take it
150.
out of the operating budget, which is just
Right, and
muddies the
so
waters.
so it just, all it does is it's gonna reduce the operating budget, the same
I
as the
understand.
lead?
We mistakenly put it in the operating budget in the spring, correct? Knowing, not knowing or not knowing that,
Not fully realizing that the part of the requirement was we actually had to borrow it. We have to
Borrow
go through it, and there is a small cost to the borrowing, it's a
It's
few
just, so it's a
$1,000.
2% for the
But
period of
it's
time
well
that you
worth the
want.
grant to
very
get in the
clear,
back
and
end.
then
So
try again.
I would recommend that the motion reads as 250,000, of which 150 is this way and 100 is the other way. I think that would be clearer to taxpayers and voters at town meeting.
And us.
We can
And us.
certainly, we can certainly check with bond counsel to see if they would support such a change.
Even if it, you know, if
Even
it's
if they
just at
don't support it.
the front part, and then it can have the other authorization language after that, but if
Right.
We're the ones trying to convey to town meeting
Who are half
clearly that haven't been doing this for weeks and have, you know, as John is predicting, 5 hours, they will have glazed over, and then they will wake up and say, what, another $250,000? So, okay, Mr. Duffy.
Jim Duffy, Exchange Street, Millis. What's the benefit of this project? Does the town itself not have any asset management systems of which we can leverage? What's this gonna get us?
If you want to read the note, in your packet that you received for the minutes. Deirdre did an excellent job on the minutes from last week's meeting, and it has all of the definitions for each one of these projects in there from what Mr. McKay had said. So I just handed the minutes to
So I will
Mr.
read this
Kaczynski.
briefly, just to summarize Article 16. For the sewer and stormwater asset management system, the cost is $250,000, of which $150,000 will be a 0% borrowing from the sewer enterprise fund and the remaining from the stormwater enterprise fund. Once the borrowings are approved, a grant will offset some of the costs. The DPW has implemented a water asset management plan. This article would fund expansion to the sewer and stormwater infrastructure inventory, assess the overall infrastructure, and develop a 5-year capital improvement plan.
I'll just add, I mean, this is opinion, and Mr. McKay can say it, but the MS4 requirements for the state are, you have a plan, you have an inventory, it's stormwater, the stormwater system, because eventually it flows to the Charles, and it's an environmental issue, and et cetera, that this is not just go clean out catch basements and call it good. There's a lot of requirements in there, and I suspect, and we should ask Mr. McKay to tell us that, yes, this in fact meets a requirement of the MS4, for the state. Correct.
Yes, I'm quite certain this is all part of the state.
He didn't dream this up,
requirements.
but we should ask the question and we should get the answer. Yep. Okay, so we will defer Article 16 to next week. Article 17.
Lance's,
Good luck.
Tickles?
Yeah, can we defer this one, because
Yes.
our page is kind of cut off, and
Yep.
I don't want to
Yep.
do a motion.
Oh,
that's-
19 are missing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's missing the one. It's
Tickles.
130,000, three.
Does anybody have it
33.
open on their
Sewer
computer so
capital
that we don't have to defer?
Or do you have one,
Sewer
Mr.
capital.
Kaczynski?
I have the full, I can read the motion if you'd like.
Yeah, and in the warrant, it gives the right number.
Can
The
you-
number is $130,333.61.
That's
Which
right.
one? Oh, for Article
17.
17?
Right. Yeah, the warrant has that
Okay.
number in it.
Can I ask you to
Sure.
take a leap?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzal?
I recommend approval of Article 17 in the amount of $130,333.61 for engineering services for an infiltration and inflow investigation project, of which $32,995.39. Well, I won't get into all the details, but it would be transfers from balances of closed projects from sewer capital articles from prior town meetings.
Right. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee recommend approval of Article 17 for the total sum of $130,333.61 for engineering services for an infiltration and inflow investigation project, of which the funds would be taken from previous articles, funds not expended, and as moved. Discussion.
I think it's great that we can use funds that we did not expend for this project, because we've had to have articles about the I&I investigation before and spent a lot of money on it, and that we can kind of take it from pockets that we have already funded. I think that's great. Thank you for all of your work on that, Carol.
She's trying to clean up all the old articles.
Hey, she does a fantastic job of cleaning up the articles and finding cash that's already there.
Can you clarify, Mr. Kaczynski, the I&I is, I know that it's a recurring requirement. Is it performed every year, or is it over a 5-year period, the entire system has to be evaluated? Or something like that?
I'm not sure. I would say that I know that we've been doing it on a very regular basis. Whether that's done in a 5-year cycle or whether it's just done every year, it's something that both the DEP and the Charles River Pollution Control District are strongly pushing us to do. And it actually serves to, save the ratepayers money. If we can cut down on that, really don't want just stormwater getting into the sewer lines and so forth, so.
And so, thank you. For the layman, infiltration inflow is really just a sanitation engineer's term for stormwater that gets into the sanitary system, the sanitary sewer system, and then, you know, we get charged for more discharge. We get charged for basically treating
Or
rainwater.
groundwater, rainwater getting into the pipes and setting it. So we're trying to, and some of the pipes are quite old, so we're trying to minimize that through different techniques to investigate and remedy any leaks in the system.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Does anybody have a copy of Article 18 and 19 that we
I
could?
can do,
Just what's in the warrant that's here.
I can do 18.
Okay.
No problem. Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 18, which will transfer $25,000 from free cash to the unemployment account to fund basically our unemployment requirements on an ongoing basis.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded, the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 18, transfer from available funds, the sum of $25,000 to the unemployment account. Discussion. None heard, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Article 18 passes unanimously. Article 19, acceptance of Pearl Street, Deborah Lane, and Teresa Drive. Is that,
Hickory
do we
Hills.
know how the select board, they're proceeding with that? There's no
Yes.
ongoing
they're
discussion?
They're planning a street layout hearing before the town meeting, so that is going forward.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 19, at which the town would vote to accept Pearl Street, Deborah Lane, and Teresa Drive as public ways within the town.
Second.
I would just, it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 19, acceptance of Pearl Street, Deborah Lane, and Teresa Drive as public ways. Discussion. My discussion comment is just that there's no funds associated with this particular article.
No, it's just approval to.
Right.
Any
allow it.
further discussion?
I mean, it has a cost in the sense of
Yep.
then the town's required to maintain those roads and plow
Right.
them and catch basins and what have you, but, I
And
mean,
they're also
there's an
added-
agreement in place.
Right,
so-
and they're added to our Chapter 90 calculations as additional mileage.
Yep,
Right.
so,
In the minutes, it says in the last sentence, the DPW director is confident the subdivision is worthy of becoming a town-accepted development.
yeah.
Okay,
That's from the minutes that, from our last meeting.
thank
And-
you.
And likewise, that the developers fulfilled their obligation with regards to catch basin cleaning and drainage system infrastructure.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Article 20.
Do we want to defer on that?
Yes. So we'll defer on 20 likely because depending on how the free cash situation pans out, there could be additional funds or reduction in funds. I mean, that number could change, so we'll defer until after the select board. The warrant opens, closes, whatever they do this week. Article 21. I assume that's why you wanted to defer.
Yes. Article 21 would be 300,000 from free cash for the injury leave indemnity fund. And,
I've deferred that too.
yeah,
for some reason.
I'm thinking defer that. Do we have kind of any sort of study or paperwork that would indicate how long that would be sufficient to fund? You know, how far that would get us?
So when I did the analysis last year and asked for the fund to be established, we had an average of $95,000 a year that we paid on OJI. Obviously, we pay
What's
more
OJ?
for the,
Oh, on the
so
job.
we have to pay the employee, the fire or police person who's has a disability. And then we also have overtime for coverage for that. Right now, we're currently running, my estimate for this year is a potential of 122,000 by the time we get to June 30th.
Okay.
And as long as we don't have any other on-the-job injuries.
So we would anticipate this would hopefully get us through 2 years. Would we be planning
I
to
was
fund
hoping
this
3
every
years.
year?
I would hope that we would fund it every year to keep it current at 300. You know, we have to pay, you don't know what's going to happen in any given year. So this is your way of preparing in case you have, you know, a year where you have, you know, several individuals, 3 or 4 people in a situation where you have to pay out. Plus, we do have an individual who's going to the 10-year medical. So after 10 years, the insurance company will no longer pay for any medical. And we do have one individual who's hit the 10-year mark with approximately $10,000 a year of medical expense. And we have an additional one that's going to be coming. We don't know right now what the average cost is for that particular individual for medical expense.
Right, so historically, our limits on insurance for, under the 111F, has been $300,000 for medical costs, or a 10-year span from the date of the injury. We have since increased the 300,000 cap, but there is no way to increase the 10-year mark. So after 10 years, if there's an officer that was injured that's still getting medical treatments, because the town accepted Chapter 100B, I believe back in the 80s, the town is responsible for those payments for the rest of that officer's life. So this will also help cover any costs that the town incurs as part of that liability.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, at this point in time, we do have sufficient free cash to increase this amount. And that's something that, you know, people may want to think about. When I originally came up with the 300,000, I was assuming 3 years at 90, you know, every year with 95,000. But this year, I just happened to do the numbers today, and we're looking at probably 122,000 this year, unless one of our individuals comes off the OJI.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to defer, just, I hope that discussion is, you know, I trust that discussion will be had or has been had with the select board, and, you know, just we'll wait and see how the free cash calculation pans out for next week. So that one, it's somewhat discretionary. So we'll defer on that one. Article 22,
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 22, which will establish a special purpose stabilization fund for the purchase of ambulances. That would be effective for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee recommend approval of Article 22, establishment of special purpose stabilization fund for purchase of ambulances. Discussion.
I mean, I'm a little bit torn because we don't have a stabilization fund for fire trucks. I mean, I know we get ambulance receipts, and we want to be able to use part of that to fund ambulances. I'm assuming that's kind of the way for us to set aside funds for the purchase of
Right.
the ambulance by using ambulance receipts every year.
Well, the ambulance receipts are already restricted to the ambulance revolving fund. So this is just to establish this fund for the ambulances right now. And then in the spring, we would then fund it. We can take money from the ambulance revolving fund to put into this capital stabilization fund.
And
Can you let us know, the ambulance revolving fund, are there any restrictions on its use Can you characterize those?
It's to be used for the service of the ambulance through the town. So currently, we fund the EMTs through that.
So it's not just the ambulance, it's
No,
the
it's the-
crews?
it's
Staffing
just
for
everything.
ambulance,
in-
supplies for the
Correct.
Supplies,
ambulance.
everything
And
that
so-
goes into it.
And so this essentially is a savings account for which the only use of the money that goes in there is purchase of an ambulance, not
Exactly.
ambulance staff.
No,
or
exactly. It's
Which
only.
has been a point of, interest of this committee and members of the committee for, for quite a while. So it essentially is a savings account for ambulances, where the money
Yes.
gets fenced for ambulances.
Right.
It helps us track the funding so that we make sure we plan to have sufficient funding from ambulance receipts into this account before the next ambulance needs to be purchased.
One of the points, just to add to it, and it's somewhat unrelated, but the select board discussed this last Monday, and I attended the select board meeting, and they were saying that this fund would pay for ambulances, and it, as you just described, it does. But that's not to say it pays for all of the ambulance. The town still could have to borrow. Just depends on when the ambulance is needed and how much money is in the savings account. It's like a down.
Certainly the
It could be, right,
Is to have sufficient funding, so there's no need for any other funding. for
correct. But to be clear, if there's $15,000 in the fund and the ambulance comes due for $300,000, it just depends on how much gets put into it and when the ambulance need comes due,
Right.
just like anything else.
The hope is that we would be able to put sufficient funds in every year, so that, I think it's a 10-year time on an ambulance, that the money would be there for the next ambulance that we need to buy.
Right.
We're financing the new one, but this would be for the next one, the next cycle.
Okay, any further discussion, Mr. Ward?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Ms. McGinnis?
Could you please tell me how many EMTs are staffed now through this fund?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I know this year, we transferred $412,000 out of that fund to pay for the EMTs. So I can't tell you how many EMTs we have.
Is there anything through the chair, if I could ask, could other employees, future employees come from that? Or are we sticking with I think it's 4 employees? And then the rest will all be dedicated to the ambulance?
I can't answer that for you right now.
Okay.
We would leave that up to the fire chief. He's the one that runs that service, and he would be the best one to describe it.
I'm just, concerned that we're using reserve funds now for staffing, and it's difficult to get a complete picture of all of the
His staffing,
salaries.
his staffing number is in his budget.
Okay.
We're funding part of the general fund, which funds his budget by taking the revolving fund. No one's paid directly out of the revolving fund. It's only done as a transfer based on town meeting vote when we set the operating budget.
I think that Kathy's questions are, well in line. And I think that the fire chief has answered them in the past, and I think he should, your questions are absolutely appropriate, and I think that he'll field them going. I think that this issue actually hopefully helps to resolve some of your concerns, because what it does is it allows for more transparency and clarity as to what is coming out of the revolving fund. I think you misspoke a little bit earlier. The ambulance crews are not being funded from the reserve fund, they're being funded from the revolving fund.
Right, I'm sorry if
It's
I
okay.
misunderstood.
It's okay.
Yeah, I
No big
meant
deal.
that.
Yep, I know you did.
It's like a payroll.
Yep, and going forward, the SAFER grant will expire, and there will be
Exactly.
funds required to pay for these paramedics, and setting aside funds solely for the purpose of purchasing ambulances is exactly what we want. So I think all those questions that you have, or additional questions that you have, are absolutely appropriate, especially during the spring cycle. And I think that we should support this article, because really all it does is authorize establishment of the stabilization savings, for lack of a better word, a savings account for an ambulance.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Underhill?
I would ask, who determines how much funds get put in, how much money gets put into this fund? Is it the fire chief? Is it the finance committee?
It's the town.
It would be the town.
It's the town.
It would be a vote at
It would be a
town
town
meeting.
meeting. Okay.
Town meeting. But,
Town meeting.
he'll advocate for how much
Yeah.
he wants. The select board will, make their budget. We'll discuss it.
Okay.
It has to be sufficient funds in the revolving fund to be able to do all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. So, there may not be a huge amount. It's not like it's going to be 100,000 a year. It may be 10,000, it may be 15. I really don't know at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. I lost my train of thought. I'm not sure I took a motion on that.
Been approved and seconded.
Yep.
Okay, super. Thank you. Any further discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Motion passes 8-1. Article 23, we will defer. And we will defer on Articles 24, 25, 26. I am prepared to take a motion on Article 27 unless the committee would like to defer on that as well.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend dismissal of Article 27 based on the recommendation of the petitioner.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded the committee vote to dismiss Article 27. Discussion. Ms. Harden?
I don't have any problem with you making the motion, but I think you need to explain why then, because there are people in the community who won't have heard that,
Ms. Harden, nobody is better suited to explain why than so just please, if you could, reiterate what you did earlier in the meeting. And when this article comes forward again during pre-town meeting and during town meeting, we absolutely will discuss it. But if you would, please.
okay. The owner of the property has requested that the people who were interested in passing this petition, that they take a break, because he would like to deal with a private party who is interested in purchasing. As I understand it, it's the same person who's been interested in purchasing for the last year, but now has, I guess, some incentive to do something. So, I defer to the owner. If he doesn't want to negotiate with the town, then there's not much point in
Okay.
passing this.
Thank you very
So we're gonna
much. Further discussion? All those in favor of dismissing Article 27, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against dismissal, please say nay. Motion passes unanimously.
That was no surprise.
Okay, thank you very much. That means that we will most assuredly finish before midnight next week.
Thank goodness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, old business, new business.
We have a bill to
We're gonna
approve.
pass by that. We have some minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we approve the minutes of October 5th as written excellently by Deirdre yet again.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we vote to approve the minutes from our last meeting, 5 October, as excellently recorded and written. All those, discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, the only thing I need to say is, there could be, I want to do a review of article assignments, just because we may have caught one or two that, on the spreadsheet. So if you would, I'll go through this as fast as I can.
Hold on, let's get it. I
Yeah,
already
give us a
closed
second
up
to dig it out.
everything.
I just put it away.
Right.
I know.
Come on, give
I
it.
tried to get them right, but I may, have been mistaken.
Deirdre, you can hear me? Deirdre, can you hear me?
Yes,
All right, we're just going to go through the spreadsheet on the article assignments. So unpaid bills, I have Joyce, currently, Article 2, Jody, Article 3, Jody, Article 4, Pete B, Article 5, Patrick, Article 6, Pete B, Article 7, Pete B, Article 8, Pete
Peter
U.
Under.
Article 9, it says Patrick, but wait,
It's PU.
yeah, it's Pete
It's
U.
PU.
Yeah.
Article 9 is Pete Underhill.
Article 9 is,
Pete Underhill.
okay.
Okay. Article 10, Patrick. Article 11, Sarah. 12, John L. 13, John S. 14, Kathy. 15, Kathy. 16, Kathy.
I had myself as 14.
14 was John S., right?
Sorry, John S. as 14.
Right, and
Okay,
Kathy's the next
thank you,
three.
sorry. 15, 16, 17, Kathy. 18, John L. 19, Joyce. 20, Joyce. 21, Sarah. 22, John L. 23, Patrick. 24, Peter U. 25, John S.
No, those two are
Sorry.
24 was Sarah.
24 is
20
Sarah.
was
All
Sarah.
right, sorry. This is
25
more
was
a
me.
function of me and my ruler. 24, Sarah. Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
25, Peter U.
Yep.
Yes.
And my blindness. I am going to be 50 tomorrow, so
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Youngster?
it's a cry for help, actually. 26, John S.
Yes.
27,
Jody.
Jody.
Yep.
And
But I thought 27.
it still
She
has
gets
an
to still
assignment.
make it.
presented.
Deirdre, would you do me a favor, for everybody's sake? Could you move the FinCom column to the left of the article number, to the other side of the sheet?
That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, there will be some changes to this, and I will communicate those separately. There'll be some minor changes to this. It has nothing to do with our voting or anything like that, which there still could be changes to the voting, but they'll be very minor in nature, okay? All right.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? I'll take a motion.
Move we adjourn.
Seconded.
Third, fourth.
All those in
fifth.
favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job, Mr.